You know what you did. Now everyone else knows too.
How could you do this to me?
Mom, don't worry.
I don't barely know you, Grandma. But I do know you, baby.
No, I can't. I'm tired of watching this. I'm going with Graham.
You need to see this.
I don't believe it.
This can't be real.
Ethan barely knows you anymore. My daughter-in-law said it across the Sunday dinner table as calmly as if she were discussing the weather. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My son stared at his plate. Her parents said nothing, and my 11-year-old grandson sat perfectly still beside me. I had spent nearly 2 years being told he was too busy to call, too old for our Wednesday afternoons, and no longer interested in seeing me. Maybe I thought I had been fooling myself. Then Ethan pushed back his chair. That's not true. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a thick blue binder. The second he placed it on the table, my daughter-in-law's face changed. I thought my grandson was about to defend me. I had no idea he was about to expose something much bigger. Before I tell you what was inside that binder, if you've ever felt pushed aside by someone you love, I'd really like to hear what you think. Please like this video, subscribe if these stories speak to you, and tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. And if you'd like, share where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. 2 years earlier, before everything became complicated, Wednesdays belonged to Ethan and me. I never called them our day in front of Rachel, because even then I had learned that certain phrases seemed to irritate her. But that was what Wednesdays were. Ours. At 3:15 every Wednesday afternoon, I would park my silver Honda beneath the maple trees outside Franklin Elementary and wait for Ethan to come running through the doors with his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. I was 9, then skinny as a fence post with permanently untied shoelaces and a mind that seemed to contain 1,000 questions at once. Grandma, how far away is Saturn? Grandma, do fish get thirsty? Grandma, if dinosaurs were alive today, would Ohio be warm enough for them? I never pretended to know every answer. Instead, I would say, that sounds like something for the notebook. The notebook had started as an ordinary black composition book from the drugstore. Across the front, Ethan had written in crooked silver marker, "Things we want to know." By the time he was 9, it was swollen with folded pages, taped-in photographs, library checkout slips, drawings, and questions we had researched together. Some answers were scientific, some were ridiculous, and some had no answers at all. Like the one Ethan wrote 3 weeks after my husband died. Where does Grandpa go when we remember him? I had stared at that question for a long time. Daniel and I had been married 41 years. He had been the kind of husband who filled a house without making noise about it. He repaired broken cabinet hinges before I noticed them, left coffee, ready for me in the morning, and somehow always remembered which side of the bed I preferred when we stayed in hotels. Then one October morning he complained about pressure in his chest. By evening, I was sitting under fluorescent hospital lights, while a doctor explained that there had been complications after a massive heart attack. I went home alone. For months afterward, my house felt enormous. There were 2 coffee mugs in the cabinet, but only one being used. 2 pillows on the bed, 2 rocking chairs on the back porch. Grief was everywhere, disguised as ordinary furniture. Ethan never tried to fix it. That may have been why I needed him so much. He simply came. He would drop his backpack by my kitchen table and ask whether I had any tomato soup. He would complain about multiplication worksheets or tell me some impossible fact he had learned about black holes. Sometimes he talked about Daniel, sometimes he didn't. Both were fine with me. One Wednesday that winter, Ethan found Daniel's old telescope in the hall closet. It wasn't valuable. Daniel had bought it from a neighborhood garage sale years earlier for $40, then spent more money repairing it than he had paid for it. Ethan carried it into the living room, like he had discovered buried treasure. Was this Grandpa's? Yes. Did he look at planets, mostly the moon? And sometimes he claimed he could see Jupiter. Could he? Your grandfather claimed many things after 2 glasses of bourbon. Ethan laughed so hard he nearly dropped the telescope. That evening we carried it into the backyard. The cold made our breath white, and I wrapped Ethan in one of Daniel's old flannel jackets because he had forgotten his own coat at school. I adjusted the telescope while Ethan bounced impatiently beside me. When the moon finally came into focus, Ethan went completely silent. For a child who could talk without stopping for 30 minutes, silence meant something important. "Grandma," he whispered, "it has shadows. It does. It looks different when you really see it." I remember those words because I would think about them many times later. Things look different when you really see them. That spring, I gave Ethan the telescope. He refused at first. "But it's Grandpa's. That's why I want you to have it. What if I break it? Then we fix it. What if I can't? Then we remember you loved it enough to use it." He hugged me so quickly that my glasses shifted sideways. When Rachel came to pick him up that evening, Ethan carried the telescope toward her SUV. "Look what Grandma gave me." Rachel smiled. At least I believed it was a smile. "That's nice. It was Grandpa's. I heard." Ethan kept talking excitedly about the moon while Rachel opened the back hatch. Then she looked at me. "You know his room is already pretty cluttered. If you'd rather he keep it here, no. He'll want it now." There was something in her tone I didn't understand. At the time, I dismissed it. Rachel and I had never been especially close, but we had been civil. She was organized in ways I wasn't. Her kitchen counters were spotless. Her calendars were color-coded. She planned birthday parties 6 weeks in advance and kept Christmas decorations labeled by room in plastic containers. I admired some of that. I had spent 32 years as an elementary school librarian, so I appreciated organization myself. But Rachel organized people too. There was a right time to call, a correct amount of notice required before visiting, approved foods for Ethan, approved television shows, approved extracurricular activities. I respected those rules because she was his mother. If Rachel said Ethan needed to finish homework before I picked him up, I waited. If she asked me not to give him dessert, I didn't. I never wanted to be the grandmother who undermined a parent and then called it love. Still, something gradually began to change. It started with small comments. One afternoon, Rachel arrived while Ethan and I were making grilled cheese sandwiches. He had insisted that mine tasted better than hers. Children say things like that. I laughed and said, "Don't tell your mother." Unfortunately, he did. "Grandma makes the best grilled cheese in Ohio." Rachel put her purse on the counter. "Apparently, Grandma does everything best." I thought she was joking. I smiled. "You should see my laundry. That will restore your confidence." Rachel didn't laugh. Another Wednesday, Ethan showed her a science project we had built from cardboard and painted foam balls. "Our solar system," he announced proudly. Grandma helped. Rachel inspected it. "You had a whole week to do this at home. I wanted to do it here." "Of course you did." Again, the words were harmless on paper. The tone wasn't. I began noticing how often Rachel's expression tightened when Ethan talked about my house. "Grandma lets me read after dinner. Grandma has Grandpa's old records. Grandma says tomatoes taste better warm from the garden. Grandma knows where Orion is." None of it sounded threatening to me. To Rachel, somehow, it seemed to be. One afternoon, while Ethan was upstairs looking for a puzzle, Rachel stood beside my kitchen sink and watched me rinse 2 mugs. "He talks about you constantly," she said. I smiled. "Well, he talks constantly in general. I'm serious, Lucy." Something in her voice made me turn around. "What's wrong with that?" "I just think boundaries are healthy." Boundaries. He has a home. I know. And parents. I know that too. She folded her arms. "I don't want him getting confused about who makes the decisions." I set the mug carefully into the drying rack. "Have I contradicted one of your decisions?" "That isn't the point." "Then I'm not sure what the point is." Rachel sighed like I was being deliberately difficult. "You two are very attached. He's my grandson." "Yes, your grandson, not your child." That sentence stayed with me. I wanted to defend myself. Instead, I said, "I'm aware of that." When Ethan came downstairs, Rachel immediately changed the subject. I told myself not to dwell on it. Families had awkward conversations. Mothers and mothers-in-law stepped on each other's toes. It didn't have to mean anything larger. A month later, Ethan asked if he could sleep at my house on a Friday. He had stayed overnight before, usually when Mark and Rachel attended weddings or work events. This time Ethan asked because he wanted to. "We can use the telescope," he said, "and make pancakes Saturday." I looked at Rachel. "That would be fine with me if it's fine with your parents." Ethan turned eagerly toward her. "Please." Rachel's jaw tightened. "We'll see." The sleepover never happened. A week later she called me on Tuesday evening. Her voice was polite. Too polite. "Lucy, I wanted to talk about Wednesdays." My hand tightened around the phone. "All right. Ethan's getting older. School is more demanding. He has activities now. He always finishes his homework here." "I know. But his schedule is getting too complicated." There was a pause. Then she said it. "I think the Wednesday routine needs to stop." I stared at the empty chair across from my kitchen table. Ethan's notebook was still sitting there from the week before. "Stop completely for now." "Did Ethan ask for that?" Another pause. Shorter this time. "No. But I'm his mother. I have to make decisions that are good for him." I swallowed the first response that came into my mind. I had always believed respecting a parent's authority was part of loving a grandchild. So I said the words Rachel expected. "Of course. Thank you for understanding." After we hung up, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The late afternoon sunlight fell across Ethan's notebook. I opened it without thinking. On the newest page, he had written one question in large letters. "What should we learn?" "Next Wednesday." I closed the book. At the time, I believed Rachel was changing a schedule. I didn't yet understand that she was beginning to change a story. And slowly, carefully, she would teach both Ethan and me to believe the other one had stopped showing up. The first Wednesday without Ethan felt strangely quiet. At 3:15, I found myself standing at the kitchen counter slicing an apple I had no reason to slice. For years, I had automatically prepared something before he arrived. A bowl of strawberries, crackers, and cheese. Tomato soup if the weather was cold. Some habits settle so deeply into your hands that your mind doesn't catch up when they are no longer needed. I put the apple slices into a glass container and closed the refrigerator. Then I looked at the clock. 3:17. Normally by then Ethan would already be talking. I told myself not to be dramatic. Rachel had not forbidden me from seeing my grandson. She had simply said his schedule was becoming complicated. Children grew. Schoolwork increased. Life changed. I understood all of that. At least I wanted to. The following Wednesday I called Rachel around 4. "Hi," I said. "I was wondering if Ethan might want to come over for dinner." There was a brief silence. "He has homework." "Oh. All right. Quite a bit, actually. I can help him with it." Another pause. "I think it's better if he stays focused here." "Of course." I hated how quickly those words came out of my mouth. Of course. It became my most useful phrase. Rachel used it to close doors, and I used it to pretend I didn't hear them shutting. 2 weeks later, I asked whether I could pick Ethan up on Friday. Rachel said he had soccer practice. I hadn't known he had joined soccer. "That's wonderful," I said. "When are his games?" "Oh, the schedule changes. Could you send it to me?" "I'll try." She never did. The next month, I finally saw Ethan when Mark brought him over on a Saturday morning. Rachel had an appointment, and Mark needed to stop by the hardware store, so he asked whether Ethan could stay with me for 2 hours. I almost laughed at how grateful I felt. 2 hours. That was what my relationship with my grandson had been reduced to, and I was treating it like a gift. Ethan came through my front door, wearing a blue hoodie and carrying a science book under one arm. "Grandma," he hugged me hard enough to make me stumble backward. "Well," I said, laughing, "you don't seem to have forgotten where I live. Dad said we only have 2 hours. Then we'd better not waste them." We made grilled cheese. He checked the tomato plants. Hi told me about his new teacher, a boy in his class named Connor, who could make disgusting noises with his armpit, and a science unit about ecosystems. Not once did he behave like a child who had outgrown me. When Mark returned, Ethan groaned. Already Mark smiled apologetically. "Your mom's waiting." Ethan looked at me. "Can I come next Wednesday?" My heart lifted before I could stop it. "I'd love that." Mark looked uncomfortable. "Ask your mom." Ethan sighed. That should have bothered me more than it did. Instead, I kissed the top of his head and said, "We'll figure something out." We didn't. The Wednesday visits became every other week for a while, then once a month, then only whenever Mark happened to be available to bring Ethan by. I stopped asking as often because I could hear the irritation in Rachel's voice when I did. Sometimes she didn't hide it at all. "Lucy, we talked about this." Or, "He has other things in his life." Or, "You can't expect him to spend every free afternoon at your house." I never had expected that. But defending myself seemed to make everything worse. So I adjusted. I called instead. At first, Ethan answered. "Grandma, we would talk for 15 or 20 minutes. Then the calls became shorter. "Hey, Grandma, Mom says I have to finish homework." "Of course, sweetheart." Then Rachel started answering more often. "He's busy right now. He's in the shower. He's doing a project. He's at a friend's house. He's already asleep." I began calling earlier, then later. It didn't make much difference. One Sunday afternoon I asked, "Could you have him call me back?" "Sure." He didn't. The next day I called again. Rachel sounded tired. I told him. "Oh, he probably forgot." "That's all right. He's 10, Lucy. You know how children are." I did know how children were. I had spent more than 30 years working with them. Children forgot homework. They forgot jackets. They forgot permission slips. They forgot where they put their shoes while they were still wearing them. But Ethan had never repeatedly forgotten me. Still, I told myself not to make a problem where there wasn't one. I began sending things instead. Nothing extravagant. A postcard from a day trip I took with a friend. A funny bookmark shaped like a rocket. A mystery novel I thought he might like. A birthday card with a terrible joke printed inside. I always wrote something personal. "Saw this and thought of you. Tell me what you're reading. The moon is supposed to be especially bright tonight. Grandpa would have made us stand outside in the cold. Love you bigger than Jupiter." For a while, Rachel would text me after packages arrived. "Got it." Or "Thanks." But Ethan never mentioned them. At first I didn't notice. Then I sent him a book called Exploring the Night Sky for Kids. It had diagrams of constellations, explanations of meteor showers, and simple instructions for using a telescope. The moment I saw it at a bookstore, I thought of him. I wrapped it in dark blue paper covered with silver stars. Inside I wrote, "For the boy who taught me that the moon looks different when you really see it. Love, Grandma." I mailed it the first week of December. Tracking showed it had been delivered. That evening I called Rachel. "Did Ethan get the book?" "Yes." "Did he like it?" "He hasn't opened it yet." A little disappointment pinched at me. "Oh. He has so much stuff, Lucy. I understand." 2 days later, Rachel texted, "He liked it. Thanks. That should have been enough." I told myself it was enough. Christmas came. Mark and Rachel invited me for lunch on Christmas Day, but only for 2 hours because they were spending the evening with Rachel's parents. I arrived carrying gifts and a pecan pie. Ethan hugged me immediately. I gave him a new red scarf and a small model of the solar system. "You're still into space, aren't you?" I asked. "Obviously." He said it with such dramatic seriousness that I laughed. Later, while Rachel and Mark were in the kitchen, Ethan and I sat near the tree. He was telling me about a planetarium trip his class had taken. "They showed us how to find Cassiopeia," he said. "There's a good diagram of it in that astronomy book I sent you." He frowned. "What astronomy book?" I smiled, thinking he had forgotten. "The one with the dark blue cover. Exploring the Night Sky." His expression didn't change. "I don't have that." "Yes, you do. I mailed it." "No, you didn't." My stomach tightened. "Maybe you haven't opened it yet." I would have opened a space book. Before I could answer, Rachel walked in carrying a tray. "What are you two talking about?" "The astronomy book Grandma said she sent me." Rachel's face changed for barely a second. Then she smiled. "Oh, that. It's somewhere in your room." Ethan looked confused. "I've never seen it." "You have too many books." "No, I don't." "Ethan." Her tone was sharp enough that he stopped. I immediately tried to smooth things over. "It's probably under something. No big deal." Rachel looked at me. Exactly. But something had shifted inside me. Not enough to become suspicion. Not yet. Just enough to make me wonder. A few weeks later, Rachel informed me that she had removed me from Ethan's school pickup list. The district tightened security, she explained. I was surprised. I thought grandparents could still be authorized. It's complicated. Do you need another copy of my ID? No. We're just keeping the list to parents. Mark too, obviously. I almost asked what had changed. Instead, I said, all right. A month later, I ran into another grandmother I knew from my library days. Her granddaughter attended the same school. She mentioned picking her up twice a week. I nearly asked whether the security policy had changed. I didn't. I was beginning to fear the answer to questions I had not yet admitted I was asking. The strangest part was how reasonable everything sounded, one piece at a time. One canceled Wednesday, one missed phone call, one forgotten package, one school rule, one busy weekend. No single event looked cruel enough to accuse someone over. Together, they formed something I could feel, but couldn't yet name. Distance. Carefully measured distance. And because Rachel never slammed a door in my face, I kept wondering whether I had imagined the door at all. There were nights when I blamed myself. Maybe I had been too involved. Maybe I had leaned on Ethan too much after Daniel died. Maybe Rachel was right that I needed better boundaries. I began analyzing every memory. Had I hugged Ethan too long, called too often, talked about Daniel too much? Was I trying to preserve something that should naturally change as a child grew older? The questions exhausted me, so I decided to behave perfectly. I stopped asking for Wednesdays. I limited my calls. I mailed gifts without expecting acknowledgement. I made myself easy, quiet, undemanding. And every time I did, another small piece of my relationship with Ethan disappeared. One afternoon I called Rachel just to ask how he was doing. He's fine. How's school? Fine. Could I speak with him for a minute? He's gaming. I can call later. He'll probably be studying. All right. There was a silence. Then Rachel said, Lucy, you know he's getting older. I know. He doesn't need the same kind of attention anymore. I stared out my kitchen window at the bare patch of garden where Ethan and I had planted tomatoes. I know. He's becoming independent. I'm glad. Good. After we hung up, I sat down at the table. The old notebook was still in the drawer beside me. Things we want to know. I opened it. The final page we had completed together contained a question in Ethan's handwriting. Can people remember the same thing differently? I almost smiled. We had planned to look it up. Instead, I closed the notebook and put it back in the drawer. I still believed Rachel was protecting her son's schedule. I still believed Mark would tell me if something were truly wrong. And more than anything, I still believed that if Ethan missed me, someone would tell me. I didn't yet understand that Rachel had already begun telling each of us a different story. And because both Ethan and I trusted the adults standing between us, neither of us realized how much was being taken away. Ethan's 10th birthday was in April. For years, birthdays had been easy between us. I never competed with Mark and Rachel over gifts, never tried to make my present the biggest or most expensive, and never expected a separate celebration just because I was his grandmother. Usually I made the chocolate cake Ethan loved. It was nothing fancy. 2 layers, chocolate frosting, no elaborate decorations. Just the same recipe I had used since Mark was a boy, with a little extra vanilla, because Daniel always said that was the secret. Ethan called it grandma cake. The week before his birthday, I called Rachel. I wanted to check what day you're celebrating, I said. I can bring the cake whenever it works best. There was a pause. Oh, Lucy, you don't need to do that this year. I leaned against the kitchen counter. I don't mind. I know, but we're keeping it really small. That's fine. Just a few kids from school. I waited. Rachel didn't add anything. So there isn't a family dinner, no. We're trying something simpler this year. I looked at the small calendar hanging beside my refrigerator. I had already written Ethan, 10 in blue ink across Saturday. All right, I said. Maybe I could stop by earlier in the day and give him his gift. Another pause. Saturday is going to be hectic. I could come Friday. He has practice. Sunday, we'll probably be exhausted. Each answer came quickly enough that I began to understand the conversation wasn't really about scheduling. I swallowed. Would he rather I mail his gift? Rachel sighed softly, not dramatically. That somehow made it worse. Lucy. I think he's at the age where birthdays are more about his friends now. I understand that. Good. I waited for her to say something like, "We'll find another time." She didn't. Then she added, "He wanted it pretty casual." The wording caught my attention. He wanted that yes. Something cold moved through me. I told myself not to overreact. Children changed. 10 was different from 7. Maybe he didn't want adults hovering around. Maybe the closeness I remembered belonged to a younger version of him. Still, I heard myself ask, did Ethan say he didn't want me there? Rachel was silent for just a beat. Then she said, "He said he wanted people he sees regularly." That sentence landed harder than I expected. People he sees regularly. As if the distance between us had happened by accident. As if I had been the one who stopped Wednesdays. Stopped pickups, stopped visits, stopped phone calls. I gripped the edge of the counter. I see. I don't want you to take it personally. That almost made me laugh. How else was I supposed to take it? But I had spent months trying not to become the difficult mother-in-law Rachel seemed to expect me to be. So I said I won't. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen for several minutes without moving. Then I opened the cabinet beneath the island and took out the cake pans. I had already bought the ingredients. For a moment, I considered putting everything away. Instead, I baked the cake. Not because anyone had asked me to, because I needed to do something with my hands. I mixed the batter, greased the pans, made the frosting. The familiar motions steadied me. When the cake cooled, I frosted it and wrote, "Happy 10th Ethan" across the top. Then I sat at my kitchen table and stared at it. There was something almost embarrassing about that cake. A celebration no one had invited me to. I ended up cutting one slice for myself. The rest went to my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, who had 3 grandchildren visiting that weekend. I did not tell her why. Ethan's gift was different. For months he had been fascinated by meteorites. The last time he had visited, he spent nearly half an hour explaining the difference between meteorites, and meteoroids to me. I had pretended to confuse the terms just to hear him correct me. So I found a small, genuine meteorite fragment from a reputable science shop in Dayton. It came in a display case with a certificate explaining that the fragment came from an iron meteorite discovered in Argentina. It wasn't expensive, but it felt like Ethan. I wrapped it in dark blue paper. Inside the card I wrote, "For my favorite explorer of things bigger than both of us. Happy 10th birthday. Love you bigger than Jupiter, Grandma." I mailed it Wednesday, so it would arrive before Saturday. Tracking showed it was delivered Friday afternoon. Rachel never texted to say they received it. I told myself not to call. Saturday came. I stayed busy. I cleaned the upstairs closet. I went to the grocery store. I returned 2 books to the library, even though they weren't due for another week. Around 4, I almost drove past Mark's neighborhood, just to see whether there were balloons. I stopped myself. That would have been pathetic. At least that was the word I used against myself then. Pathetic. I hated how quickly loneliness had turned me cruel toward myself. That evening I made tea and sat in the living room with a mystery novel. I read the same paragraph 4 times without absorbing a word. At 7:30 my phone buzzed. For half a second I hoped it was Ethan. It was Facebook. I nearly ignored the notification. Then I saw Rachel's name. She had posted photographs. Happy double digits to our amazing boy. I opened the album. The first photo showed Ethan standing behind a huge decorated cake at a bowling alley. There were children around him. That part matched what Rachel had told me. Then I swiped. The second photograph showed Mark beside Ethan. The third showed Rachel's parents, Margaret and Paul, both wearing matching bowling shirts. I stopped. Swiped again. Rachel's sister was there. Her husband. 2 cousins. Another aunt. A family friend I recognized from Thanksgiving. Adults. Plenty of adults. The party had not been just a few kids. It had not been family-free. It had simply been Lucy-free. I stared at one picture longer than the others. Margaret stood behind Ethan with her hands on his shoulders. The caption read, "Nothing better than celebrating with the people who are always there." I felt something inside me crack. Not loudly, quietly, like ice under too much weight. I closed Facebook, then reopened it. Don't know why. Maybe I wanted to prove I had misunderstood. Maybe there was another gathering planned. Maybe someone had invited me and I had missed a message. Grief makes intelligent people bargain with obvious facts. I looked at every picture again. There were 23. In most of them, everyone looked happy, except Ethan. He smiled in a few. But there was a flatness in his expression I recognized. Children can smile because someone points a camera at them. I had seen thousands of school photographs during my years as a librarian. There is a difference between a smiling mouth and a happy face. Ethan's eyes kept drifting somewhere outside the frame. In one picture, everyone was gathered around the cake. His face was turned toward the entrance to the bowling alley, as though he were waiting for someone. I immediately hated myself for thinking it. Lucy, I thought, stop inventing things because you're hurt. I put the phone down. At 9, Mark called. Hey, Mom. I knew why. Rachel had probably seen that I viewed the photos. Hello? There was an awkward pause. So, Ethan had a good birthday. I saw. Another pause. Mom, I know this probably looks bad. I almost laughed. Does it? Rachel told me she'd explained it. She did. She said you understood. She told me it was a small party for children. Mark exhaled. Originally it was. And then 12 adults accidentally arrived, Mom. No, Mark. I'm trying to understand. He lowered his voice. Margaret and Paul offered to help pay for the bowling package. Then her sister came and it just sort of grew. Did you think to call me when it grew silence? There it was. The answer. I closed my eyes. Did Ethan ask me not to come? Mark hesitated. That hesitation frightened me more than a yes would have. I don't know. Rachel told me he wanted people he sees regularly. That doesn't sound like how he'd say it. No, it doesn't. For the first time, Mark sounded uncomfortable with the story himself. I asked, did you hear him say he didn't want me there? No. Did he ask where I was? Another silence. Then Mark said, Mom, can we not do this tonight? Something in me went still. Why? Because it's his birthday. I don't want this turning into a fight. I'm not fighting. I know, but Rachel's already stressed. Rachel was stressed. I almost asked whether anyone had considered how I felt. Instead, I said, all right. Mark softened. I'll bring Ethan over soon. You've said that before. I mean it. Good night, Mark. I ended the call before he could answer. That night I cried for the first time over what was happening. Not because I had missed cake and bowling. Because I was beginning to suspect I had been removed from my grandson's life while everyone around me called it normal. 3 days later I checked the mail. Bills, a grocery flyer, a charity letter, and one small envelope with no return address. My name was written across the front in uneven pencil. Lucy Brooks. I recognized the handwriting before I opened it. My hands started trembling. Inside was a folded sheet of notebook paper. A drawing. 2 stick figures stood beside a telescope beneath a sky crowded with stars. One figure had gray hair. The other wore a blue sweatshirt. Between them was a crooked little heart. There was no signature. There didn't need to be. I turned the page over. 4 words were written on the back. I missed Wednesday. I sat down on the front steps with the envelope still in my hand. For months I had been told Ethan was growing away from me, that he was too busy, that he wanted people he saw regularly, that I needed to accept the natural distance between a grandmother and a growing boy. But a 10-year-old child had found some way to send me a message that said the exact opposite. And as I stared at those 4 words, one thought finally broke through all the excuses I had been making for everyone else. If Ethan missed Wednesday too, then why had I been made to believe he didn't? I kept Ethan's drawing on my kitchen table for 3 days. Not hidden in a drawer, not tucked safely into a book. Right there where I could see it every time I walked past. 2 stick figures beside a telescope, a crooked heart, and those 4 words on the back. I missed Wednesday. Every time I looked at them, the same question returned. Who had mailed it? The envelope had no return address. The stamp had been placed slightly crooked in the top right corner. My address had been written in pencil, and the letters looked exactly like Ethan's. But Ethan was 10. He didn't drive. He didn't walk alone to the post office. Someone had helped him, or he had found another way. On Thursday morning, I finally called Mark. He didn't answer. I almost left a message, but something made me stop. Instead, I called Rachel. She answered on the fourth ring. "Hello, Rachel, it's Lucy." I know. Her tone wasn't openly rude. It rarely was. That was one of the things that made conversations with her so difficult. There was always just enough politeness for me to wonder whether I was imagining the coldness underneath it. "I got something in his mail," I said. "What, a drawing from Ethan?" Silence. "A drawing." "Yes." "What kind of drawing?" "A telescope. Him and me." Another pause. Then she said, "Okay." I waited for surprise. It didn't come. There wasn't a return address. That's strange. He wrote that he missed Wednesday. This time the silence lasted long enough that I could hear movement in the background. A cabinet closing, water running. Then Rachel said, "Lucy, are you sure it's recent?" I looked down at the drawing. "What do you mean Ethan draws constantly? You probably have old things from him." This arrived 3 days after his birthday. "That doesn't mean he mailed it. I didn't say he mailed it personally." Her voice tightened. "What exactly are you suggesting?" There it was. The shift. Within seconds, I had somehow gone from asking a question to making an accusation. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm trying to understand. Well, I certainly didn't mail it. Did Mark? I doubt it. Did Ethan make it recently? I have no idea." I took a breath. "Could I ask him?" "He's at school." "Later then." "Lucy." The way she said my name made my shoulders tense. "Yes, I think you're reading too much into some old drawing." I stared at Ethan's handwriting. "I'm looking at a postmark from this week." "Well, maybe he found an old picture and gave it to someone. Kids do things. Who? I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out." Rachel exhaled sharply. "I have to go. Could you just tell Ethan I got it? If it actually came from him, I'm sure he already knows." The line went dead. I sat at the table afterward feeling foolish. Not because I believed her, because I had allowed the conversation to end without getting a single answer. That evening I called Mark again. He answered from his car. "Hey, Mom. Everything okay? I received a drawing from Ethan." "Yeah, you knew about it, no?" I explained. Mark listened quietly. When I finished, he said, "That's weird. Rachel thinks it might be old." "Could be. The postmark isn't old." "Right." I waited. He didn't say anything else. "Mark, could you ask him?" "Sure. Not Rachel. Ethan." Another pause. "Okay, please." I said I will. But he sounded tired rather than concerned. I hated that. I hated feeling like I was dragging my son towards something he didn't want to see. 2 days passed. Mark didn't call. When I finally texted him, he responded, "Forgot. Busy week, I'll ask." He never got back to me. I placed the drawing in a folder. Not because I was collecting evidence. Not yet. I simply didn't want to lose it. About 6 weeks later, something even stranger happened. My former library, Franklin Branch, held an annual used book sale every spring. I had worked there for 22 years before transferring to the elementary school system, and I still volunteered whenever they needed help. That Saturday, I spent the morning sorting donations. Mysteries on one table, cookbooks on another, children's books near the windows. Around noon, one of my old coworkers, Denise, handed me a stack of middle-grade novels. "These came from Franklin Elementary's donation drive," she said. "That school must produce half the books in Columbus." She laughed. "Mostly things parents are tired of stepping over." I carried the stack toward the children's section. The third book was The Secret Garden. I smiled because Ethan and I had once argued over whether he was too old to read it. I opened the cover. Something blue slipped onto the floor. A folded piece of paper. I bent to pick it up. My heart stopped before I even unfolded it. The writing on the outside said, "For Grandma." Inside, there were only 2 sentences. "I finished the book about the boy in the museum. You were right about the ending. Underneath, Ethan had drawn a tiny planet with rings. Saturn. I read the note twice. Then a third time. The boy in the museum. I knew exactly what he meant. Months earlier, I had mailed him a children's mystery novel about a boy who sneaks into a museum after hours. I had written inside the cover, "The ending is better than the beginning. Trust me." Rachel had never told me whether he received it. Ethan had never mentioned it. Until now. I found Denise. "Do you know where these donations came from?" She pointed toward a cardboard box. "School collection. Parents and kids drop things off all week. Do you know which family donated this one?" She looked at the book. "No." "Why no reason?" That was a lie. There was very much a reason. I stood beside the sale table holding Ethan's note and felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. Suspicion. Real suspicion. Not anxiety. Not insecurity. Not a grandmother being unable to accept that a child was growing older. Something was wrong. Ethan had written to me at least twice, and neither message had come through normal family channels. I folded the note carefully and put it into my purse. That afternoon, I called Rachel. I almost told her about it. Instead, I stopped. If Rachel genuinely knew nothing, there was no reason to accuse her. And if she did know something calling her first, would only give her time to shape another explanation. So I said nothing. I began paying closer attention. Not spying, not interrogating, listening. A month later, I ran into Rachel and Ethan at a Kroger near my house. I was standing near the produce section deciding whether $6 was an unreasonable price for blueberries when I heard, "Grandma." I turned. Ethan was already running toward me. He wrapped both arms around my waist. For one beautiful second, everything felt normal. "Look at you," I said. "You've grown again." "No, I haven't." "Yes, you have. That's what old people always say." I gasped dramatically. "Old people." He grinned. Then he looked over his shoulder. Rachel was still 20 feet away comparing labels on 2 packages. Ethan's expression changed. He leaned closer. "Did you get the blue one?" I blinked. "The blue what?" His smile disappeared. "The blue one. Sweetheart, I don't know what you mean." His eyes widened. Before he could answer, Rachel reached us. "Well," she said brightly, "small world." I looked at her. "Yes." Ethan opened his mouth. Rachel put a hand on his shoulder. "Come on, we need to finish shopping." "But Mom, we're late." I looked directly at Ethan. "What blue one?" Rachel's hand tightened slightly on his shoulder. "He's probably talking about some school thing." "No, I'm Ethan." One word. That was all it took. He stopped speaking. I saw something in his face then that disturbed me more than Rachel's tone. Calculation. A child deciding what was safe to say. I knew that expression. I had seen it during my years working in schools. Children learned very quickly which subjects made adults uncomfortable. I bent slightly so I was closer to his eye level. "It was really good to see you." "You too." Then quietly he asked, "You got the other one though, right?" My heart began pounding. He nodded quickly. Relief flashed across his face. "Yes," I said. "I got it." Rachel was watching both of us. "Come on, Ethan." He gave me one last hug. Then they walked away. I stayed beside the blueberries for several minutes. The blue one. There had been another message. Something Ethan expected me to receive. Something I never saw. That evening I went home and took a yellow legal pad from my desk. At the top I wrote Ethan. Then I started making a list. Christmas astronomy book mailed December 4. Birthday meteorite mailed April 8th. Birthday card. 3 postcards. Museum mystery novel. 2 handwritten letters. School concert inquiry. 4 invitations for dinner. 7 requests to visit. Phone calls. I checked my phone records. There were more than I remembered. I counted the calls I had made over the previous year. 38. Most lasted under 2 minutes. Several lasted less than 30 seconds. Rachel answering. "He's busy. He's studying. He's out. He'll call back." I wrote down everyone I could remember. By 10 that night, the legal pad had 2 full pages. I stared at it. For months, I had accepted Rachel's suggestion that I had somehow become less present in Ethan's life. But the paper in front of me showed something different. I had been trying. Again and again, maybe imperfectly, maybe too cautiously, but I had not disappeared. And now I knew Ethan had been trying too. A drawing, a note hidden inside a donated book, something blue that had never reached me. For the first time, I stopped asking myself whether I had been too attached. I began asking a different question. Who had been standing between us, and why I waited 3 days before asking Mark to meet me? Not because I was afraid of him, because I was afraid of what would happen if he looked me in the eye and still chose not to see what I was seeing. I suggested a coffee shop near his office, somewhere neutral. He arrived 10 minutes late in his work clothes, loosened his tie, and sat across from me with the exhausted expression of a man who already had too many problems before his mother added another one. "Everything okay?" he asked. "No." That got his attention. I placed my purse on the chair beside me. For a moment, I almost softened the answer. Then I remembered the yellow legal pad on my kitchen table, the drawing, the note, the blue one that had never reached me. "I need to ask you something," I said. Mark leaned back. "All right. Has Ethan ever told you he doesn't want to see me?" His forehead creased. "What?" "It's a simple question. Mom, where is this coming from? Has he?" Mark glanced toward the counter as if someone behind me might rescue him from the conversation. "I don't know. That means no. That means I don't know." I folded my hands. "Rachel has told me several times that Ethan is getting older, that he wants distance, that he prefers people he sees regularly." Mark sighed. "Okay. She told me his birthday was mostly for children." "I know about that. She told me he didn't really need Wednesdays anymore. His schedule did get busy. She told me he doesn't ask about me." Mark looked at me then. There was no anger in his face. Only discomfort. That almost hurt more. "Rachel said that, yes." He rubbed a hand over his jaw. "Well, I mean, she's told me something similar." My chest tightened. "What exactly?" "That he doesn't bring you up much anymore." The coffee shop suddenly seemed too loud. Milk steaming behind the counter, cups knocking together, someone laughing 2 tables away. I kept my voice low. "And you believed that Mark shifted in his chair?" "Why wouldn't I? Because I'm your mother." "That doesn't mean Rachel's lying. I didn't say it did." His expression changed slightly. "You're implying it." I opened my purse. "No. I'm showing you why I'm asking." I took out a photocopy of Ethan's drawing. I had left the original at home because I didn't want anything happening to it. Mark picked it up. His face softened. "When did he make this? I don't know." He turned it over. "I missed Wednesday," he read quietly. "It arrived 3 days after his birthday." Mark looked up. "Did Rachel see this?" I told her. "And she suggested it might be old." He looked at the postmark I had copied beneath the drawing. "Obviously it wasn't mailed years ago." "I know." He studied it again. "Maybe Ethan asked one of his friends to send it." "Maybe." "That seems possible." "It does." I reached into my purse again. Then I gave him a copy of the note from the library book. He read that one more slowly. "You found this where?" "In a donated book from Ethan's school. He could have left it in there accidentally." "Yes. Mom, kids put things in books." "I know." He looked relieved that I agreed. Then I said, "He asked me about a blue one." Mark stopped. "What, I ran into him at Kroger. Before Rachel came over, he asked if I got the blue one." I told him I didn't know what he meant. He was surprised. Mark frowned. "Blue, what? I don't know. That's the problem." He put the note down. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying, Ethan has tried to communicate with me in ways neither you nor I seem to know about." Mark stared at the table. "And I'm saying I've been told he doesn't care whether he sees me." "That's not exactly what anyone said." "It's close enough." He didn't answer. I pulled out the folded sheets from my legal pad. "What's that A list?" Mark actually groaned. "Mom, read it. I don't want this turning into some investigation." Neither did I. He stared at me. I slid the pages across the table. "These are calls I made, packages I sent, invitations I offered, school events I asked about, visits I requested." Mark glanced at the first page. His expression changed. He turned to the second. "You called this much, yes. I didn't know that." "I know." He looked up. I mean, Rachel said you'd started pulling back. For several seconds I couldn't speak. Of everything he had said, that was the sentence that hurt most. Pulling back, she thought, after Dad died. Maybe you needed more space. Mark, I was calling your house. I'm just telling you what she said. I mailed your son Christmas presents. I know. No, you don't. He went quiet. I tapped the page. Do you remember the astronomy book? What astronomy book exactly? I told him about it. How I had mailed it. How Rachel confirmed it arrived. How she later said Ethan liked it. How Ethan told me on Christmas Day he had never seen it. Mark rubbed his forehead. Maybe it got lost in his room. That's what Rachel said. Well, that could happen. Yes. I leaned forward. One thing can happen, Mark. Two things can happen. 10 things can happen. At some point, you have to stop calling everything a coincidence. His eyes hardened. You think Rachel's keeping Ethan from you? I think something is happening. That's a big accusation. That's why I'm not making one yet. He looked at the pages again. I watched his face as he worked through the dates. Eventually, he said, I travel a lot. I know. You know what work's been like. Yes. Rachel handles most of the family calendar, school stuff, practices, birthday parties, appointments, and communication with me, I guess. She handles your relationship with your mother? That's not fair. No. He looked away. I immediately regretted the sharpness in my voice. Not because the question was wrong, because I knew Mark. Pressure made him retreat. His entire life he had hated conflict. When he was 13, he once spent a week pretending he had lost a school permission slip because two friends were fighting over which one would sit beside him on the bus. He had always believed avoiding a choice meant he hadn't chosen. I softened my voice. Mark, I'm not asking you to take sides. It feels like you are. I'm asking you to ask your son one question. He looked at me again. What did you ever tell Mom you didn't want to see? Grandma. Mark's mouth tightened. That's it. That's it. And if he says yes, my heart hurt just hearing the possibility. Then I'll respect it. He studied my face. You mean that? Yes. I swallowed. But I need to hear it from him. Not through Rachel. Not through you. From Ethan. Mark nodded slowly. I can do that. For the first time since we sat down, I felt a little relief. Then I asked, has Ethan ever said anything negative about me to you? Mark thought. Not really. Not really. He mentioned once that he thought you were busy. I felt cold. When I don't know. Months ago. What did he say? Mark frowned, trying to remember. Something about you not coming to one of his things. What thing? Maybe school. I honestly don't remember. Did you tell him I wasn't invited? I didn't know whether you were. That answer told me more than Mark understood. Rachel wasn't simply telling me Ethan was busy. Someone was telling Ethan I was unavailable. I sat back. Mark must have seen something in my face. Mom, don't jump ahead. I'm not. You are. I'm thinking. Rachel would never intentionally hurt him. I didn't say she would. She loves Ethan more than anything. I know. He relaxed slightly. Then I asked, has she ever told you why she thinks I've become less involved? Mark hesitated. She thinks you got too dependent on him after Dad died. That one hurt differently. Not because I hadn't wondered the same thing myself, because I had. Many nights. What does that mean? She thinks you were relying on him emotionally. Did you think that Mark didn't answer immediately? I thought you were lonely. I was lonely. That's all I mean. Loneliness isn't the same as making a child responsible for me. I know. Did Ethan ever complain about being here? No. Did he ask to stop Wednesdays? Num. Did he ask not to sleep over? Num. Did he ask me to stop calling? No. The answers came faster now. Mark finally seemed to hear them. He looked down at the paper. No. I let the silence sit between us. Then he said quietly, I didn't realize. That was Mark's defense for almost everything. I didn't realize. I didn't know. Rachel handled it. Work was busy. No one told me. I wanted to shake him. Instead, I said, that's why I'm telling you now. He nodded. We left the coffee shop 20 minutes later. Mark hugged me in the parking lot. I'll talk to him. Thank you. And Mom. Yes, please don't confront Rachel until I do. I almost laughed at the irony. For nearly 2 years I had been the one refusing confrontation. All right. But Rachel called me before Mark did. The next evening my phone rang at 7:20. Her name appeared on the screen. I knew immediately. "Hello, Lucy." Her voice was controlled. Mark had spoken to her. "I heard you two had coffee." "We did. Apparently I'm the topic now. That wasn't the purpose." What was the purpose? To understand what Ethan actually wants. Her laugh was short and humorless. "You don't trust me, I didn't say that. You made a list, Lucy." So Mark had told her everything. I felt a wave of disappointment. I made a list because I was beginning to doubt my own memory. "You're documenting me." "I'm documenting my attempts to stay in contact with my grandson." "Do you hear yourself? Yes. He is a child. He doesn't owe you constant access." "I never said he did. You keep going around me." The accusation startled me. "Going around you first, Mark. Then trying to get information at school. Then questioning Ethan in the grocery store." I asked my grandson what he meant by something he said to me. "You put him in the middle." "No, Rachel." My voice was firmer now. "You are the one telling me what he supposedly feels. I simply want to hear it from him." Her voice sharpened. "I am his mother. I know. I know him better than you do. I hope so. Then believe me when I tell you he doesn't ask about you the way he used to." My throat tightened. Why would he if he's being told I'm too busy? Silence. A long one. Then Rachel said, "I don't know what you're talking about." Mark remembered Ethan saying that. "Children misunderstand things. They do." I took a breath. "That's why I'd like to speak to him directly." "No." The word was immediate. I stood completely still. "No. Not while you're behaving like this." "Like what? Suspicious. Dramatic. Keeping records. Questioning my parenting." "This isn't about your parenting." "It absolutely is." I felt my pulse in my neck. "Rachel, I am trying very hard not to fight with you." "Then stop." "Stop what?" "Acting like you're entitled to some special place in Ethan's life." I closed my eyes. There it was again. The thing underneath everything. "I'm his grandmother." "Yes." Her voice went cold. "And you need to accept that you're not as important in Ethan's life as you think you are." The words landed cleanly. No misunderstanding. No room for interpretation. I stood in my kitchen staring at the dark window above the sink. Months earlier, those words would have sent me into another spiral of self-doubt. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was too attached. Maybe Ethan had changed. But now I had a drawing in a folder, a note from a library book, a question about something blue, 38 phone calls, packages he supposedly received and never saw. And Mark himself could not remember a single time Ethan had actually said he wanted me gone. So this time I did not argue. I did not defend myself. I did not beg Rachel to reconsider. I simply said, "Then Ethan can tell me that. He doesn't need to." "Yes, he does. Lucy. If he wants distance, I will give it to him. But from now on, I will not believe anyone who speaks for him." I hung up. My hands were shaking. Not from weakness, from something I had not felt in a long time. Clarity. For nearly 2 years I had allowed other adults to explain my grandson to me. That ended that night. I didn't know yet what Ethan would say. I didn't know how much had been hidden. But I knew one thing. The next truth I accepted about my grandson would come from Ethan himself. 3 weeks passed before I saw Ethan again. Not because I chose to wait. Because no one invited me anywhere. Mark sent 2 brief texts during that time. "Working late. Things tense at home. I'll call you soon." He never did. I stopped chasing him. I had already told myself that the next truth I accepted about Ethan would come from Ethan himself, and I meant it. That didn't make waiting easier. Every afternoon around 3:15 I still noticed the time. Old habits do not disappear simply because someone else decides they are inconvenient. I would be folding laundry, watering the garden, standing in line at the pharmacy, and suddenly I would know without looking at a clock that school had just let out. For years that had meant Ethan running toward my car. Now it meant nothing. Or at least that was what I was supposed to believe. Then one Thursday morning I ran into Denise at the library. She was sorting returned books behind the circulation desk when she looked up and said, "Lucy, are you going tonight?" "Going where?" She stopped. "The music program." I stared at her. "What music program, Franklin Elementary?" My heart gave one hard beat. "Ethan's school." "Yes." Denise looked confused. "My granddaughter's class is performing too. 5th grade. Isn't Ethan in 5th? He is." She glanced at me more carefully. "You didn't know?" I forced a small smile. I must have missed the announcement. That was easier than telling her the truth. Denise picked up a flyer from beside the computer. 7 o'clock. Auditorium doors open at 6:30. I looked at the paper. Spring Music Night. 5th grade choral and instrumental performance. For several seconds, I couldn't move. I remembered Mark mentioning that Ethan had started learning percussion. I remembered asking Rachel months earlier if there were any school performances coming up. Nothing yet, she had said. Apparently, there had been something. I took the flyer home. For the rest of the afternoon, I argued with myself. I had not been invited. That mattered. Or did it? It was a public school performance. Grandparents attended public school performances all the time. But if I went, Rachel would accuse me of going around her again. I could already hear it. "You crossed a boundary. You made this about yourself. You embarrassed us." Then another thought answered back. What if Ethan looked into the audience and wondered why I wasn't there? That question ended the argument. At 6:20, I put on a navy blouse, a gray cardigan, and the small silver earrings Daniel had given me for our 30th anniversary. I drove to Franklin Elementary. I parked near the far end of the lot. Not because I was hiding. At least that was what I told myself. Inside, the hallways smelled exactly the way elementary schools always smell: floor wax, construction paper, cafeteria food, and something vaguely like crayons. Parents filled the lobby. Children darted between adults wearing white shirts and black pants. I recognized 2 teachers from years earlier and avoided getting trapped in conversation. I wanted to be invisible. The auditorium was already half full. I chose a seat in the back row near the aisle. From there I could see almost everything without being easily seen. Rachel's parents were 6 rows from the front. Margaret was wearing a red scarf. Paul had a program folded over one knee. My stomach tightened. Of course they knew about the concert. I looked around for Mark and Rachel. They were sitting beside them. Mark was looking at his phone. Rachel was talking to her mother. There was one empty chair in their row. For one ridiculous second I wondered whether it had been meant for me. Then a woman I recognized as Rachel's sister sat down in it. I almost left. I actually stood. Then the stage lights dimmed. The audience quieted. Children began filing in. So I sat back down. The first group performed 2 songs. Then came the 5th graders. I spotted Ethan immediately. He stood near the back beside a row of percussion instruments, wearing a white button-down shirt that looked slightly too big at the shoulders. His hair had been cut shorter. That realization hurt more than it should have. I had missed a haircut, a completely ordinary thing. But estrangement is made of ordinary things. Haircuts, loose teeth, favorite foods, new shoes. Stories you never hear. The music teacher raised her hands. The first song began. I watched Ethan carefully. He seemed nervous at first. His shoulders were high. He kept glancing toward the front rows, once toward Rachel, once toward Mark. Then his eyes moved farther back, across the auditorium. For a second they passed over me, then snapped back. His face changed. There is no other way to describe it. His entire face lit up, not politely. Not because a camera was pointed at him. Not because someone had told him to smile. It was recognition. Pure, immediate recognition. He almost missed his cue. The boy beside him nudged his elbow. Ethan looked down quickly and struck the small drum in front of him, half a beat late. I pressed my fingers against my lips. The woman beside me smiled. "That one yours, my grandson. You can tell." I looked at her. "How he spotted you." I had to look away. For months I had been told Ethan barely thought about me. Yet from a stage filled with children under bright lights across an auditorium crowded with families he had found me. The program lasted almost an hour. I barely heard most of it. Every few minutes, Ethan glanced toward the back. Each time I gave him the smallest smile I could. When the final song ended, the audience applauded. Parents stood. Children began moving toward the side doors. I considered leaving before Rachel noticed me. I even reached for my purse. Then I heard someone shout. Grandma heads turned. Ethan was running up the aisle. I barely had time to stand before he reached me. He threw both arms around me. The force of the hug pushed me backward against the chair. "You came?" I laughed, but my eyes filled immediately. "I came. I didn't know you were coming. I didn't know either until this morning." He pulled back. "You saw the whole thing, every note. I messed up the first one. I noticed nothing. That means you weren't listening. That is entirely possible." He grinned. For 30 seconds, maybe 40, I forgot everything. There was no Rachel, no missing packages, no lists, no awkward phone calls, just Ethan. Then he said something that brought all of it rushing back. "Why didn't you come last time?" I stared at him. "Last time, our winter concert." My mouth went dry. I didn't know there was one. His smile disappeared. "Yes, you did. No, sweetheart. Mom said you did." I felt the room tilt slightly. "What did she say?" He looked confused. "That she told you." I kept my voice very gentle. "Told me what about the concert?" "She didn't." Ethan frowned. "But she said you were busy." I stopped breathing. Around us, the auditorium was emptying. Families were talking. Children were laughing. Someone dragged a music stand across the stage. But all I could hear were those words. "She said you were busy." How many times I asked before I could stop myself. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "What? How many times has someone told you I was too busy?" He looked uncertain now. I immediately regretted putting him in that position. "Never mind," I said softly. "You don't have to answer that." But he did. A lot. I felt something cold settle inside me. A lot. "Sometimes Mom says you're doing stuff." "What stuff? I don't know." He shrugged. "Things." I could hear my heartbeat. I had spent months hearing that Ethan was busy. Meanwhile, Ethan had been told the same thing about me. That was not a misunderstanding. Not anymore. Before I could ask anything else, I saw Rachel coming up the aisle. Her expression told me she had already seen enough. "Ethan." He turned. Rachel approached us with Mark behind her. Margaret and Paul remained several rows away. Rachel smiled, but it was the kind of smile that showed no warmth. "Lucy. What a surprise. I heard about the program this morning." "From whom does it matter?" Her eyes tightened. "It would have been nice to know you were coming." I almost laughed. Instead, I said, "It would have been nice to know there was a concert." Mark looked at Rachel. Mom didn't know Rachel didn't look at him. "There was a flyer sent home weeks ago." "To Ethan," I said. "Not to me." "We assumed you were busy." That word again. Busy. Beside me, Ethan frowned. "But you said Grandma was busy last time too." Rachel's head turned toward him. "I said she might have other things going on." "No, you said Ethan." Her voice was quiet, firm. He stopped. I saw that same calculation on his face I had seen in the grocery store. The careful retreat. My anger sharpened. But I refused to make him the battlefield. So I said, "You played beautifully tonight." He looked back at me. "Thanks. You should be proud." I was scared. "You didn't look scared." I was. That's what courage usually looks like. He smiled a little. Mark finally stepped forward. "Mom, we should talk." "Yes," I said. Rachel's posture stiffened. "Not here." "I agree." I turned to Ethan. "I'm glad I came." "Me too." Then he surprised me. "Are you coming to the science fair?" My eyes moved immediately to Rachel. Her face went still. I looked back at Ethan. "When is it? Next Thursday?" No one had told me. Again, "I would love to come." Rachel stepped in. "We haven't even worked out the schedule yet." Ethan looked at her. "It's Thursday at 6. I mean our schedule." I could feel the old version of myself rising. The woman who would say, "Of course." The woman who would back away because she feared being difficult. I let that version of me remain silent. Instead, I told Ethan, If it's open to families, I'll be there. His smile came back immediately. Rachel's did not. Then she touched Ethan's shoulder. We need to go. All right. He started to follow her. After 3 steps, he turned around. He looked directly at me. Then he tapped his backpack twice with his fingertips. Tap. Tap. I froze. It was such a small gesture that I might have missed it. But I remembered the grocery store. Did you get the blue one? Ethan tapped the backpack again. Then Rachel called his name, and he hurried after her. I stayed in the aisle while families moved around me. Mark glanced back once before following his wife. I looked at Ethan's backpack disappearing through the auditorium doors. Something was inside it. Something he wanted me to know about. And for the first time I understood that my grandson had not simply been missing me. He had been trying to reach me. I did not sleep much after the concert. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan tapping his backpack. Twice. Tap, tap. It was not random. I knew that much. Children develop little signals with people they trust. Daniel and I had done it with Mark when he was young. If we were somewhere public and he wanted to leave, he would tug his left sleeve twice. No words, no scene, just a signal. Ethan had been trying to tell me something. But I also knew I could not start pulling him aside and asking secret questions behind his mother's back. Whatever Rachel had done, I refused to make Ethan responsible for exposing it. That responsibility belonged to the adults. So the next morning I called Mark. I need to see you. He sounded tired. Mom, can this wait? No. There was a long pause. All right. Without Rachel. Another pause. Mom. Without Rachel. He exhaled. Fine. We met that afternoon at my house. I chose my house because I wanted him to see the kitchen table, the chair where Ethan used to sit, the old notebook, the life that had existed before everyone began pretending the distance between us had simply happened. Mark arrived at 5:30. He loosened his tie as he walked in. You want coffee? Number tea? No, Mom. He sat down. All right. What is this about? I placed a folder on the table. Not dramatically. I was too tired for drama. This is everything I've been trying to tell you. Mark looked at the folder. I've already seen the list. Not all of it. I opened it. First Ethan's drawing, then the note from the library book, then my call log, then printed delivery confirmations for packages, then a copy of the school concert flyer Denise had given me. Mark stared at the papers. Why do you have all this printed? Because every time I tell you something happened, you tell me there might be another explanation. There might be. Yes. I looked directly at him. But there cannot be another explanation for everything. He picked up the call log. I still don't understand what you think Rachel is doing. I think she has been telling me Ethan doesn't want me around. Mark said nothing. And I think she has been telling Ethan I don't want to be around. That's a serious accusation. I know. Based on one concert, numb. Based on 2 years. He leaned back. I could see his defenses rising, so I did not argue. Instead, I asked a question. Did you ask Ethan what I told you to ask him? Mark's eyes shifted. That was my answer. You didn't. I tried. How do you try to ask your own son a question? Things have been tense, with Rachel, with everyone. Mark. He rubbed his forehead. Rachel thinks you're building a case against her. I'm trying to understand why my grandson believes I'm too busy to see him. She said there have been misunderstandings. I almost laughed. Of course she did. Mom, what misunderstanding happened at the winter concert? He looked at me. What do you mean? Ethan said Rachel told him I knew about it and was too busy to come. Mark's expression changed. She told him that. Yes. He looked toward the window. And she told me nothing about the concert. I know. No, Mark, you didn't know. He looked back at me. You were sitting in the audience. He stiffened. That's not fair. Why? Because I didn't control the invitations. There were no invitations. It was a public school event. His jaw tightened. Rachel handles the school calendar. There it was again. Rachel handles it. I had heard those words so many times that they no longer sounded like an explanation. They sounded like surrender. I reached for the old black composition notebook from the sideboard and put it between us. Mark recognized it. Is that the thing Ethan used to bring here? Yes. I opened to a page filled with his handwriting. Things we want to know. Do you remember how often he came here every week? Do you remember him begging not to know? Do you remember me insisting he come when he didn't want to know? Do you remember him complaining that I made decisions his parents should make? No. Then tell me what changed. Mark looked down. Kids change. They do. I waited. Did Ethan? He did not answer. The room was quiet for several seconds. Then Mark said, Rachel thought you were getting too involved. I nodded slowly. We've established that. She felt like he was always comparing things to your house. What things? Food, books, routines. I almost smiled from disbelief. That was threatening, not threatening. Then what? Mark hesitated. She felt judged. That surprised me. By me? Yes. When I don't know. Give me one example. She said you had a way of making her feel like she wasn't doing enough. I sat back. For the first time I saw something beyond the anger. Something sadder. Did she ever tell me that? No. Did she ask me to stop something specific? I don't know. I looked at him. Then she wasn't setting a boundary, Mark. She was responding to something she felt without telling me I was doing it. He stared at the table. I continued carefully. Was this before or after Daniel died? Mostly after. That made sense. After Daniel died. Ethan and I had grown closer. Not because I tried to replace anyone, because grief made our Wednesdays more precious. I wondered how many times Rachel had watched Ethan run into my house and interpreted his joy as criticism of hers. Still, insecurity alone did not explain the missing packages, or the lies. I turned another page in my folder. This is when things really changed. Mark looked at the date. January 2 years ago. His expression tightened slightly. I knew he remembered. That January, 6 months after Daniel's death, I had updated my estate documents. Nothing unusual. Anyone who loses a spouse eventually confronts paperwork, bank accounts, beneficiaries, property, insurance, the uncomfortable administrative side of grief. Daniel and I had saved responsibly. We were not wealthy, but we were comfortable. Our house was paid off. We had retirement accounts. And Daniel had left a life insurance policy I did not immediately need. I decided part of that money should eventually help Ethan. So I established an education trust. Not an enormous fortune. Enough to cover college or vocational training if invested carefully. I remained trustee. The money was for Ethan's education. Not for household bills. Not for vacations. Not for a nicer car. Not even for tuition before college unless I specifically approved it. At the time, Mark had thanked me. Rachel had been less pleased. She asked whether the trust could help with private school, I said. Mark nodded. I remember. And I said no. You said it wasn't what Dad intended. That's right. Daniel and I had spoken about Ethan's education many times. Daniel believed strongly that money meant for a child's future should stay protected until that future arrived. Rachel had pushed. Private school was education, she argued. So were summer programs, so was tutoring, so was a better laptop. Her logic was not entirely unreasonable. But I knew how quickly protected money could become family money. So I kept the boundary. Mark tapped the page. You think this is about the trust? I think the timing matters. He shook his head immediately. Rachel isn't cutting you out over money. I didn't say that. It sounds like you did. No. I leaned forward. I think the trust made something she already felt worse. He looked at me. What do you mean? She already felt I had too much influence with Ethan. Mark said nothing. When I refused to let her access money connected to him, maybe that confirmed something in her mind. That you didn't trust her. Possibly. She hated that. I know. He looked surprised. She told you? She didn't have to. I remembered the conversation clearly. Rachel sitting at my dining table asking whether private school tuition qualified. When I said I wanted the trust preserved, her expression changed. She had said, "So you get to decide what counts as important for our son," I had answered. "For this money, yes." At the time, I considered it a disagreement. Now I looked at the dates. Within 2 months, Wednesdays became less frequent. Within 4 months, Rachel started screening calls. Within 6, I was removed from school pickup. By Christmas, packages were disappearing. I slid the timeline toward Mark. He looked at it. For once, he did not immediately defend her. He simply stared. Finally, he said, "That's close." "Yes." He read the dates again. I never noticed. No. This time, I did not soften the truth for him. Mark leaned back and closed his eyes. "I feel like I'm losing my mind. I know. What if there's an explanation? Then I want to hear it. And if there isn't," I looked at him. "Then you have a bigger problem than I do." His eyes opened. "What does that mean?" "It means I may have been losing access to my grandson." I paused. "You may have been living with someone who was controlling what everyone in your family believed." Mark flinched. The words sounded harsh. I did not take them back. He stood and walked toward the window. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then he said something I was not expecting. "Rachel wants to move." I stared at his back. "What, she's been looking at houses outside Cincinnati?" My stomach tightened. "That's almost 2 hours away." "I know. Why, she wants to be closer to her parents. They live 20 minutes from you now. They're thinking about relocating too." I watched him carefully. "When did this start?" "A few months ago." "Why didn't you tell me? We haven't decided anything." "Does Ethan know?" "Not really." I felt anger rise again. "What reason is she giving?" Mark turned around. "She thinks we need a fresh start." "Away from what?" He hesitated. Then he said the sentence that changed the entire conversation. "She said Ethan doesn't have any meaningful reason for us to stay in Columbus." For a moment I thought I had misunderstood him. "No meaningful reason." Mark looked miserable. "She meant besides work and school." "No, Mark." I stood. "She meant me. Mom, she meant me." He did not deny it. The house seemed suddenly smaller. I thought of Ethan tapping his backpack, the drawing, the note, the missed concert, the birthdays, the story he had been told about my absence. This was no longer about whether Rachel liked me. It was about whether she could remove me slowly enough that eventually no one would remember I had been there, except Ethan. And somewhere inside that backpack, my grandson had been keeping something Rachel had failed to erase. For the next several days, I kept thinking about the phrase Mark had used. No meaningful reason to stay. It should not have mattered so much. People moved every day. Families changed cities for jobs, schools, cheaper houses, better neighborhoods, retirement weather. But after everything else, I could no longer hear Rachel's words as neutral. Not when she had spent nearly 2 years teaching Ethan that I was unavailable. Not when she had been teaching me that Ethan no longer cared. Not when her parents somehow managed to be included in every celebration I was told was too small, too busy, too private, or too complicated. I did not want to become bitter toward Margaret and Paul. That would have been easy. Too easy. They were not the ones who had stopped answering my calls. They had not told Ethan I was busy. As far as I knew, they had simply accepted the place Rachel had made for them. Still, once I began looking carefully, I saw the pattern everywhere. It started on social media. I had avoided Rachel's page since Ethan's birthday because looking at photographs of events I had been excluded from felt like pressing on a bruise just to see whether it still hurt. But now I went back. Christmas at Margaret and Paul's house. Ethan opening presents beside the fireplace. A weekend at Hocking Hills. Margaret beside Ethan on a hiking trail. A summer baseball game. Paul teaching Ethan how to keep score. A school fundraiser. A photograph captioned, "So proud of our boy. Our boy." I stared at those words longer than I should have. I knew Rachel's parents loved Ethan. That was not the problem. A child does not have a limited supply of grandparent love. There should have been room for all of us. But somehow there had been room for everyone except me. I scrolled farther back. Thanksgiving, a family brunch, a pumpkin patch, a weekend barbecue. The pattern was so obvious that I felt embarrassed I had not recognized it sooner. Every time I had been told Ethan was overwhelmed, busy entering a phase where he needed fewer adults around him, Rachel's family had remained fully present. She had not been creating distance between Ethan and grandparents. She had been creating distance between Ethan and one grandparent, me. That realization hurt, but another one hurt more. Other people had believed I wanted it that way. I discovered that by accident. A few days after my conversation with Mark, I went to the pharmacy. While I was standing near the greeting cards, a woman called my name. Lucy. I turned. It was Karen Wells, the mother of one of Mark's childhood friends. I had known Karen for more than 30 years, though we only saw each other occasionally now. She smiled and hugged me. It's been forever, it has. We made the usual conversation: retirement, grandchildren, knees, weather. Then she said, "I'm glad to see you getting out." I frowned. Getting out. Her expression shifted. "Oh, I just meant—" She trailed off. I knew that pause. "Karen." She looked uncomfortable. "I heard you'd been keeping to yourself since Daniel passed." Something inside me went still. "Who told you that I don't remember?" "Yes, you do." My tone was gentle, but she understood I was serious. She lowered her voice. "I think Rachel mentioned it at the school fundraiser last year." I stared at her. What exactly did she say? Karen looked embarrassed now. "Nothing terrible. Just that you were still having a hard time and didn't really want to attend family." Karen looked embarrassed now. "Nothing terrible. Just that you were still having a hard time and didn't really want to attend family things." I nearly laughed. Did she say I didn't want to? I think so. When Karen's face tightened. "Lucy, I don't want to get in the middle of something." "You're not." I forced myself to smile. "I'm just trying to understand." She hesitated. "She said you preferred being alone these days." There it was. Not just inside the family, outside it too. I thanked Karen, finished buying my medication, and drove home. I sat in my car in the driveway for almost 10 minutes before going inside. The cruelty of it was not dramatic. That was what made it effective. Rachel had not told people I was unstable. She had not accused me of doing anything outrageous. She had simply offered a believable explanation for my absence. "Lucy is grieving. Lucy prefers solitude. Lucy has pulled back." Who would question that a widow becoming withdrawn after losing her husband sounded reasonable, compassionate even? And because I had kept quiet to avoid conflict, I had accidentally helped her make it convincing. I had not shown up. I had not corrected anyone. I had not asked publicly why I was missing. So from the outside, Rachel's story fit the facts. I called Mark that evening. "I need you to come over. Mom, I'm still at work. Then tomorrow." What happened? I found out what people have been told about me. There was silence. "What do you mean Rachel has been telling people I chose to withdraw after your father died?" Mark exhaled. "Who told you that, Karen Wells?" Another silence. "I'll come tomorrow." He arrived the next night looking more worried than defensive. That was new. I told him about Karen. Then I showed him the photographs. Not because the pictures themselves proved anything, because I wanted him to understand the contrast. "Look at this date." He looked. "The school fundraiser. Your wife told Karen I didn't want to participate." Mark's forehead tightened. "Did she invite you?" "No." He looked at another photograph. "Thanksgiving. I was told you were keeping it small." His face changed. "There were 14 people in the picture." "I didn't realize she told you that." I felt anger flare. There it was again. "I didn't realize." This time I did not let it pass. "You keep saying that." Mark looked up. "What you didn't realize?" "Because I didn't." "I know." My voice sharpened. "But at some point that stops being an explanation." His jaw tightened. "I work 60 hours some weeks." "So?" The word came out harder than I intended. Mark blinked. I continued. "You didn't have to understand everything, Mark. You only had to notice your mother disappeared from your son's life." He looked hurt. Good. That thought shocked me. But it was true. For almost 2 years I had been carrying all the hurt because everyone else was more comfortable if I did. Now Mark needed to carry some of his own. "You saw your son stop coming here," I said. He looked down. "You saw me stop being at birthdays. I thought you saw Rachel's parents at everything. Mom, and never once asked why I wasn't. That's not fair. What part? You're acting like I deliberately excluded you." "No." I leaned forward. "I'm saying you were comfortable enough not to ask." His face went pale. For a moment I saw the boy he had once been, the one who hated confrontation, The one who would rather disappear into his room than tell two angry friends which movie he wanted to watch. But Mark was not 13 anymore. He was 41. He was a husband, a father, and his fear of conflict had consequences now. He sat quietly for almost a minute. Then he said, "You're right." I had prepared myself for another defense. The agreement left me almost speechless. What I should have noticed. His eyes were wet. "I thought Dad dying changed you." "It did. I thought maybe you wanted less." "I never wanted less of Ethan. I know that now." "No." I shook my head. "You knew it then too." That hurt him. I could see it. But he nodded. "Yes." We sat in silence. Then Mark reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. I started looking. At what old messages? My pulse quickened. "What kind of messages yours?" I stared at him. He unlocked the phone and turned it toward me. "Our family iPad is connected to my Apple account. It gets some of the same messages I do." "All right. Rachel mostly uses it for schedules. Ethan uses it sometimes for games." He scrolled. "I searched your number." Messages appeared. My messages. Months of them. "Are you free Saturday? Tell Ethan I hope his test went well. I'd love to come to the science night if families are invited." Did the package arrive? Could Ethan call me when he has a chance? My chest tightened seeing them all together. Mark tapped one. "Look here." Beneath it was the small word, "read." I frowned. "So I never opened this. Maybe you forgot." "That's what I thought." He scrolled farther. More messages. "Read. Read. Read." This one came while I was in Denver. He showed me the date. I was in meetings all day. Rachel could have opened it. Yes. Did she answer no? Another message. "Read." No reply. Another. "Read." No reply. One from me asking about Ethan's spring science project. "Read." No reply. One asking whether there were any school performances coming up. "Read." No reply. I looked at Mark. She saw them. He swallowed. "It looks that way. And told you I had pulled back." "I know." The room felt very quiet. Mark scrolled again, then stopped. "What?" He stared at the screen. "What is it?" He enlarged an old message. It was from me. I recognized it immediately. December 6th. "Did Ethan get the astronomy book? Tracking says it arrived yesterday." Below it read, "Mark said I never saw this. But Rachel answered me from her phone and said he got it." He looked at me. Neither of us needed to say the next part. The pieces were no longer scattered. They were beginning to connect. Mark stood abruptly. "I need to talk to Rachel." My stomach tightened. "Don't do it angry." He laughed once without humor. "You've spent 2 years telling me not to accuse her. Now you're telling me not to confront her. I'm telling you to get answers, not start a war." He put the phone in his pocket. "What if she lies? Then listen carefully." "To what?" "Not just what she says." I looked at him. "What she avoids." Mark nodded slowly. He left around 8. I heard nothing that night. Nothing the next morning. By afternoon I was beginning to wonder whether he had backed away again. Then my phone rang. "Mark." I answered immediately.
"What happened?" His voice sounded exhausted. "Rachel wants everyone together Sunday. Everyone, you, me, her, Ethan." He hesitated. "And her parents." My stomach tightened. "Why her parents?"
"She says if we're going to accuse her of manipulating the family, she wants everything said openly." I never used that word. I did. I closed my eyes. Mark continued. "She says she can explain everything." "Did she explain the messages?" "Not really." "The book, no. The concerts." "She said there's more context." Of course there was. There was always more context. "Did she admit telling people I wanted to be alone?" Mark was silent. "Yes." My chest tightened. "What did she say? That she thought it was true?" I nearly laughed. "And Sunday is supposed to solve this, I don't know." Then his voice changed. Lower. More serious. "But Mom, there's something else." "What?" When I asked why her parents needed to be there, she said, "They've been affected by your behavior too." I stared at the wall. My behavior. Yes. I could almost see the conversation coming. Rachel would turn everything around. My questions would become accusations. My sadness would become instability. My desire to see Ethan would become dependence, and she would present herself as the mother who had merely been protecting her child. I knew that before Sunday arrived. What I did not know was that Rachel had made one mistake. She assumed the adults at that table would decide what was true. But Ethan had been watching too. And somewhere inside his backpack, he had been keeping his own version of the story. Sunday arrived with the kind of weather that made everything feel sharper. Cold sunlight, bare trees, a pale blue sky. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror for longer than necessary, changing my blouse twice before settling on a simple cream sweater and dark slacks. I hated that I cared what I looked like. But some part of me knew this was not going to be an ordinary family dinner. Rachel had called it a conversation. Mark had called it something we needed to get through. I had spent the entire morning wondering what Ethan had been told. That frightened me more than anything else. Adults can defend themselves. Children often do not realize they are standing in the middle of a story someone else has written for them. At 4:55, I parked outside Mark and Rachel's house. 5 minutes early. I almost stayed in the car until exactly 5. Then I heard Daniel's voice in my head. "If you're already there, Lucy, just go in." So I did. Mark opened the door. He looked tired. Not physically tired, defeated tired. The kind of exhaustion that comes from living inside tension and pretending it is manageable. "Hey, Mom. Hello?" He hugged me. It was brief but genuine. "Everyone's here." Of course they were. I stepped inside. The dining room table was already set. Rachel stood near the kitchen island arranging a platter of roasted vegetables. Her parents Margaret and Paul sat in the living room. Ethan was on the floor near the coffee table with his backpack beside him. The moment he saw me, he smiled. Not cautiously, not politely. He smiled the way he always used to. "Grandma." I smiled back. "Hi, sweetheart." He stood as if he might come hug me. Then he glanced toward Rachel. The movement was tiny, but I saw it. He stayed where he was. That hurt. Rachel looked over. "Lucy." "Rachel." Her tone was composed, almost formal. "I'm glad you came." I wanted to say, "You invited me." Instead, I said, "Of course." We sat down for dinner. At first, no one mentioned why we were there. That was almost worse. Rachel asked Paul about work. Margaret commented on the vegetables. Mark barely ate. Ethan pushed potatoes around his plate. I drank too much water because my mouth was dry. It felt like everyone was performing normal family life while waiting for someone to ring a bell. Finally, after plates had been cleared, Rachel folded her hands on the table. "I think we should talk." Mark looked at her. "We're already here." She ignored the edge in his voice. "I asked Mom and Dad to stay because this situation affects the whole family." Margaret looked uncomfortable. Paul stared at the table. I said nothing. Rachel turned toward me. "Lucy, I know you've been upset." I felt my spine stiffen. Upset. Such a small word. As if I had lost an umbrella, she continued. "And I understand that after Daniel died, things were difficult for you." Mark shifted in his chair. I knew immediately what she was doing. Setting the frame. Grief first. Then loneliness. Then dependence. Then me. Rachel spoke gently. Too gently. "I think you became very attached to Ethan during that period." I was already attached to Ethan. "I know." She smiled slightly. "But more so after Daniel passed." I looked at Mark. He did not interrupt. "Not yet." Rachel continued. "I think that's understandable. You lost your husband. You needed connection." My hands remained folded in my lap. "Rachel, what exactly are you trying to say?" She inhaled slowly. "I'm saying I felt like Ethan started becoming responsible for your emotional well-being." Ethan looked up. What Rachel glanced at him. "This is adult conversation, honey." He frowned. "You said my name." Mark said. "He has a point." Rachel's mouth tightened. Then she looked back at me. I felt there were no boundaries anymore. What boundary did I cross? We've been through this." "No." I kept my voice calm. "You have said you felt I was too involved. I am asking for one specific example. She looked at me for several seconds. You made Wednesdays into something sacred. I picked him up from school. You made it seem like your relationship with him was separate from us. How you had your notebook, your routines, Daniel's telescope. I stared at her. You're describing a grandmother spending time with her grandson. You're minimizing it. Margaret shifted uncomfortably. Paul cleared his throat. Mark finally spoke. Rachel, Mom's asking a fair question. Rachel turned toward him. So now we're doing what ganging up on me. No one's ganging up on you. That's exactly what this feels like. I saw the conversation sliding away. So I said, then let's make it simple. Rachel looked at me. Fine. Did Ethan ever tell you he did not want to see me? Silence. Not long. Maybe 2 seconds. But long enough. Rachel's eyes flicked toward Ethan, then back to me. Yes. The word landed heavily. I looked at Ethan. He looked confused. I asked more than once. Rachel's posture stiffened. Yes. Ethan's eyebrows drew together. Mark noticed. So he specifically said he didn't want to see Mom. Rachel's voice sharpened. In different ways. That's not what she asked, Mark said. Rachel looked at him. He didn't always say, I don't want to see Grandma. Children don't express things like adults. I turned to Ethan. Sweetheart, you don't have to answer anything you don't want to. Rachel immediately said, Lucy, don't. I looked back at her. Don't what? Put him in the middle. I almost lost my patience then. Instead, I said quietly, he has been in the middle for almost 2 years. That is exactly the kind of dramatic statement I'm talking about. Mark leaned forward. Rachel. No. I'm done being treated like some villain because I tried to protect our son, from what I asked. She looked directly at me. From feeling responsible for your loneliness. The room went still. There it was. Not implied, not softened. Said openly. I felt strangely calm. Did Ethan tell you he felt responsible for me? Rachel hesitated again. He didn't have to. I nodded. So that was your interpretation. My judgment as his mother. And based on that judgment, you stopped telling me about school events. I didn't stop telling you everything. The winter concert. She sighed. You were going through a difficult time. Did I tell you I was too upset to attend? No. Then why did you tell Ethan I was too busy? Ethan looked quickly at Rachel. Mark looked at her too. Rachel's face changed slightly. I said you might have other things going on, Ethan spoke. No, you didn't. Every adult at the table turned toward him. Rachel's eyes narrowed. What you said Grandma couldn't come because she was busy. Rachel exhaled slowly. Ethan, sometimes adults simplify things for children. But she wasn't busy. I didn't know that. I said, you never asked me. Rachel's attention returned to me. And you never asked what was happening in our house before assuming the worst. I did ask, repeatedly. Yes, exactly. I blinked. Exactly what you kept pushing. For contact with my grandson. For access. The word was deliberate. I felt Mark tense beside her. Rachel continued. You've been documenting calls, keeping notes, questioning school events, asking Ethan things privately. You're making this relationship into something it shouldn't be. I looked at her. What should it be? A normal grandmother relationship? What does that mean? It means accepting that you are not his parent. I have never claimed to be. It means understanding that he has a life that does not revolve around you. I never asked it to. It means accepting that relationships change. My throat tightened. Rachel kept going. He's not 7 anymore, Lucy. I know. He has school, friends, activities, other grandparents. The last phrase landed with intent. Margaret looked down. I said I have never asked him not to love your parents. That's not the point. Then what is? Rachel gave a small, frustrated laugh. The point is that you have created this idea that you and Ethan have some special bond that everyone else is supposed to accommodate. Ethan looked at me, then at her. Mark said, Rachel, stop. No, Mark. She needs to hear this. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, but I would not cry. Not yet. Rachel turned fully toward me. You have built this whole narrative that someone took Ethan away from you. I have asked why I was excluded. Because things changed. Did Ethan ask for them to change? Again that pause. Again the answer was not immediate. Rachel's voice hardened. He doesn't need to formally request every boundary. I nodded. You still haven't answered. I already did. No. You said he expressed it in different ways. He did. How he stopped asking about you. Ethan's head lifted. Rachel continued before he could speak. He became less interested in visits. He adapted. He moved on. I felt something inside me break open. Not because I believed her, because of how confidently she said it in front of him. As if his own feelings belonged to her. As if she could describe his heart while he sat 3 feet away. I looked at Ethan. His face had gone completely still. Is that true? I asked softly. Rachel cut in. Lucy. I ignored her. Ethan, did you stop wanting to see me? His mouth opened. Rachel spoke again louder. This is exactly what I mean. You're pressuring him. I asked one question. You're making him choose. No. My voice was steady now. You have been choosing for him. Mark whispered Rachel, but she was past listening. She turned toward me with years of resentment finally visible. You need to accept reality. I stared at her. What reality? Her voice was cold. Ethan barely knows you anymore. Silence. No one moved. Margaret looked horrified. Paul stared at Rachel. Mark's face went pale. I felt the sentence strike every bruise I had been carrying for 2 years. The missed birthday, the empty Wednesdays, the unanswered calls, the packages, the winter concert, the photograph of Ethan looking toward the entrance. For one terrible second, I almost believed her again. Then a chair scraped across the floor. Ethan stood. That's not true. Rachel turned. Ethan, sit down. No. His voice trembled, but he did not sit. He walked toward the living room. My heart began pounding. He picked up his backpack. Rachel's expression changed, not dramatically, just enough. A flash of recognition. Then fear. Ethan, she said sharper now. Leave that alone. He froze. Every person at the table heard it. Leave that alone. Not, what are you doing? Not what's in there. She knew. Ethan looked at his mother, then at me. He carried the backpack to the table. His hands shook as he unzipped it. I could barely breathe. He reached inside. For months I had wondered about the blue one. For weeks I had wondered why he kept tapping that backpack. Now he pulled out a thick blue 3-ring binder, its corners bent, and its cover scratched from being carried back and forth. Across the front, written in black marker, were 4 words: Grandma, Lucy, and me. Ethan placed it on the table. Then he looked directly at his mother. If I barely know Grandma, he said, then why do I have all of this? No one answered. And for the first time that evening, Rachel had nothing to say. No one moved. The blue binder sat in the middle of the dining table between the serving bowls and half-empty glasses of water. Grandma, Lucy, and me. 4 words written in Ethan's uneven black marker. My name looked enormous. For almost 2 years I had been told my grandson had gradually stopped thinking about me. Yet he had carried an entire binder with my name on it inside his backpack. Rachel stared at the cover. Her face had lost its color. Ethan, she said quietly, this isn't the time. He looked at her. When is the time? Rachel opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Mark slowly leaned forward. What is that, buddy? Ethan put one hand on the binder. Stuff. What kind of stuff? Grandma stuff. Something in his voice broke my heart. Not because he sounded angry, because he sounded as though the answer should have been obvious. He opened the binder. The first page was a photograph. I recognized it immediately. Ethan was 8 years old, sitting at my kitchen table with chocolate frosting on his nose. I was beside him holding up a birthday cake that leaned slightly to the left because I had taken it out of the pan too soon. Daniel had taken the photograph. I remembered everything about that afternoon. Ethan had insisted the crooked cake looked like a mountain on another planet. I touched the edge of the plastic sleeve. Where did you get this? Dad printed some pictures a long time ago. Mark frowned. I did for my school project. He flipped the page. There were more photographs. Ethan in my backyard holding a tomato bigger than his fist. Ethan and me at the library. Daniel helping him adjust the telescope. The three of us standing beside a Christmas tree. A photograph of Ethan asleep on my couch with a book open on his chest. Each one had been placed carefully inside a plastic sleeve. Some had notes underneath. Best tomato ever. Grandpa said I was pointing the telescope at the neighbor's roof. Grandma let me check out 6 books. I laughed once before I could stop myself. Then the laugh became something dangerously close to a sob. Rachel crossed her arms. Those are old pictures. Ethan looked at her. I know. She seemed relieved for half a second. Then he turned another page. This isn't. There was a drawing of Saturn. Underneath in pencil, show Grandma my science test, 96%. Beside it was the test itself. The teacher had written excellent work, Ethan. At the bottom, he had written another note. Grandma would have said I missed 4 points because I rushed. I covered my mouth. That was exactly what I would have said. Ethan looked at me. You always say I rush. You do. A tiny smile appeared. See, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Mark reached toward the binder. Can I see? Ethan hesitated, then pushed it slightly toward him. Mark turned another page. There was a list titled Books Grandma and I Need to Read. Below it were 12 titles. Several had check marks. Others were circled. Beside one, Ethan had written, She Will Hate the Ending. I recognized the title. You were right, I said. Ethan looked confused. About what I would have hated that ending. For the first time since opening the binder, he laughed. It lasted only a second. Then he flipped another page. My chest tightened. Birthday cards, handmade ones. Not cards I had sent him. Cards he had made for me. One said, Happy birthday, Grandma. I hope we can have Wednesday again soon. Another, I miss your tomato soup, even though Mom says it has too much salt. Paul made a soft sound that might have been a laugh, but no one else joined him. I looked at Rachel. She was no longer watching the binder. She was watching Ethan. Her expression had changed from fear to calculation. Sweetheart, she said, why don't you put this away and we can talk privately? No. His answer was immediate. Rachel stiffened. Mark said, let him finish. Her eyes snapped toward him. Mark, he has a right to speak. He's 11. Exactly. The room went silent again. Ethan turned another page. A folded envelope was taped carefully to the paper. My address was written across the front. Lucy Brooks. My street. My city. My zip code. No stamp. I leaned closer. What is that? Ethan peeled the envelope gently from the tape. A letter. Did you write it? He nodded. When last summer. My heart sank. Why didn't I get it? His eyes moved toward Rachel. She looked away. Ethan opened the envelope and removed a folded sheet. I wrote about camp. He handed it to me. I unfolded it. Dear Grandma, camp was okay, but the food was gross. I learned how to paddle a canoe, and I fell in the lake because Connor stood up when he wasn't supposed to. I wish Grandpa could see the stars here because there are more than at home. Mom said you have a lot going on, so I hope you're okay. I drew the Big Dipper, but it looks bad. Love, Ethan. Below the letter was a crooked drawing of stars. My vision blurred. You thought I had a lot going on, he nodded. Mom said you were having a hard time. I closed my eyes. Rachel spoke quickly. You were. I looked at her. No. You were grieving. Of course I was grieving. My voice remained quiet. But grieving did not mean I didn't want my grandson. Rachel's jaw tightened. I never said you didn't want him, Ethan interrupted. You said you would mail that. The room froze. Rachel stared at him. What? He pointed to the letter in my hand. You said you'd mail it. Ethan, I don't remember every piece of paper you hand me. I gave you 3. Mark's head turned slowly toward her. 3. Ethan nodded. 1 after camp, 1 after the science fair, and the blue one. My pulse jumped. The blue one. Finally. What was the blue one, I asked. Ethan looked at me. A card. For what? He shrugged. No reason. Then he looked embarrassed. I just made it. Where is it? He turned another page. There was an empty plastic sleeve. Across the top he had written, "Blue card, did Grandma get it?" 3 question marks. Below that, "Ask her next time." I stared at the page. That's why you asked me at the grocery store. Ethan nodded. I thought maybe you got it and forgot. I never got it. His face fell. I knew it. Rachel leaned forward. Ethan, I don't know what happened to every card. He looked directly at her. I gave it to you. I may have misplaced it. All of them. The question came from Mark. His voice was low. Rachel turned. Excuse me, all of them. Rachel, I never said all. Mark gestured toward the binder. How many letters did he give you? I don't know. You said you didn't remember any. I said I don't remember every piece of paper. That's not the same thing. Stop interrogating me. Margaret finally spoke. Rachel. Her daughter turned sharply. What Margaret's face was pale. Just answer him. Rachel stared at her own mother. For the first time I saw genuine panic. Not outrage, not irritation. Panic. Ethan kept turning pages. School papers, drawings, little lists, questions he wanted to ask me. One page was titled, Things to Tell Grandma When I See Her. The list was 23 items long. Tell her I got taller. Ask if Grandpa ever saw a shooting star. Tell her Connor got braces. Ask if she still has the tomato seeds. Tell her I hate clarinet. Then crossed out, I quit clarinet. Underneath, tell her I switched to percussion. My throat closed. These were not memories of a relationship that had ended. They were records of a relationship Ethan was waiting to continue. He had been saving ordinary life for me. All the little things grandchildren tell grandparents when they believe another visit is coming. Mark turned another page, then stopped. What is this? It was a copy of something familiar. A page from our old black notebook. Things we want to know. I looked at Ethan. How did you get that I took pictures of some pages with Dad's old tablet? When before Wednesdays stopped. He looked down. I thought maybe we'd need them. Need them. The words nearly broke me. Rachel shook her head. This is getting completely distorted. No one answered. She looked around the table. He's a sentimental child. He saves things. Yes, I said. My voice surprised even me with how steady it sounded. He saves things because they matter to him. That doesn't prove anything. Ethan looked at her. It proves I know Grandma. Rachel blinked. His voice trembled slightly, but he continued. You said I barely know her. I said your relationship has changed. No. You said I barely know her. Rachel opened her mouth. Ethan pointed toward the binder. I know she cuts grilled cheese diagonally because Grandpa said triangles taste better. A tiny ache moved through my chest. I know she hates when people bend book pages. He looked at me. You do. I do. I know she puts cinnamon in hot chocolate even though I don't like cinnamon. You always complain and still drink it. I know. His eyes filled. I know she cries at that dog movie even though she says she doesn't. I laughed through tears. That is private information. Ethan almost smiled. Then he looked back at Rachel. I know Grandpa called her loose. The room went silent. Daniel had been the only person who called me that. I felt tears slide down my face. Ethan's voice became smaller. And I know she misses him. I reached across the table. Ethan took my hand. His fingers were warm. For 2 years, adults had discussed whether this child remembered me, whether he needed me, whether I mattered. And the entire time he had been keeping proof of ordinary love in plastic sleeves. Not because I had asked him to, not because anyone had told him to document anything, because somewhere along the way, he realized memories were disappearing between us and saving them made him feel less helpless. Then Ethan reached into the back pocket of the binder. He pulled out 4 envelopes, all addressed to me, all in his handwriting, none stamped. He placed them on the table. I found these in Mom's desk drawer. Rachel went completely still. Mark stared at the envelope. When last month, You went through my desk, Rachel demanded. Ethan flinched. Mark immediately said Rachel no. He had no right. He was looking for letters he thought you mailed. That does not make it okay, no, Mark said. But that is not the question right now. Ethan looked at his mother. You told me you sent them. Rachel's breathing had changed. Shallow. Fast. She stared at the 4 envelopes as though they were dangerous. I looked at their dates. One from the previous summer. One from Christmas. One after the spring concert I had missed. One from only 3 months earlier. My heart pounded. Why were they in your desk? Rachel said nothing. Mom, Ethan asked. She looked at him. Something in her expression collapsed. Not completely, but enough. I didn't send some of them. Mark's face hardened. Some, Rachel swallowed. I stopped some communication. The words fell heavily onto the table. There was no misunderstanding left. No lost package. No scheduling confusion. No child naturally drifting away. She had stopped communication. Deliberately. Ethan's grip tightened around my hand. I did not feel triumphant. That surprised me. For months I had imagined that discovering the truth would feel like vindication. It didn't. It felt like grief. Because the proof I had wanted was sitting inside a blue binder created by an 11-year-old boy who had been forced to preserve a relationship adults should have protected for him. I looked at Rachel. Why her eyes were wet now. She glanced at Mark, at her parents, at Ethan, then finally at me. You want the truth? Yes. She let out a shaking breath. Fine. Her voice cracked. I stopped them. She looked at the envelopes. I told him you were busy. I told you he needed space. Mark stared at her as though he no longer recognized his wife. Rachel wiped at her cheek angrily. But I had a reason. No one spoke. And for the first time since Ethan opened that binder, I realized the hardest part was not learning what Rachel had done. It was about to be hearing why she believed she had the right to do it. For several seconds no one said anything. Rachel had admitted it. Not accidentally, not vaguely, not as some misunderstanding created by busy schedules and missed messages. She had stopped the communication. She had told Ethan I was busy. She had told me Ethan wanted space. And now she was sitting at the same dining table where she had just told everyone my grandson barely knew me. I looked at the 4 unopened envelopes, then at the blue binder, then at Ethan. He was still holding my hand. That was what kept me from exploding. Not forgiveness, not patience. Him. I would not turn this into a screaming match with an 11-year-old child sitting in the middle of it. So I looked at Rachel and asked again. Why? Her eyes were wet, but her jaw remained tight. You really want me to say it? Yes. In front of Ethan, I glanced at him. Before I could answer, Ethan said, I want to know. Rachel closed her eyes. Sweetheart, this is complicated. You lied to me. The words were quiet. Much quieter than if he had shouted them. Rachel opened her eyes. I was trying to protect you. From Grandma, no. Then from what Rachel looked helplessly toward Mark. He did not rescue her. For once my son stayed silent because the silence belonged to someone else. Rachel turned back to me. It didn't start the way you think. How did it start? She laughed once bitterly. With Wednesdays. I waited. You always acted like those afternoons were harmless. They were. To you. Her voice sharpened. Ethan came home talking about you constantly. I thought of all the things Mark had already mentioned, the grilled cheese, the books, the telescope. Children talk about places they enjoy. Yes. And every conversation became a comparison. I frowned. How Rachel leaned forward. Do you know how many times I heard Grandma lets me do it this way, or Grandma listens longer, or Grandma makes this better, or Grandma knows that already? Ethan looked embarrassed. Mom, I didn't mean I know you didn't. Her voice softened toward him, then hardened again when she looked at me. But it was constant. I took a breath. Why didn't you tell me? Because what was I supposed to say? Exactly what you're saying now. That my son liked being at your house too much, no. That you were feeling compared. Rachel looked away. It sounded ridiculous. It sounds human. That surprised her. She looked back at me. I continued. Parents get tired. Grandparents often get the easier version of children. We don't handle every morning rush or every argument about homework. Her face changed slightly. Exactly. But that doesn't explain lying. I'm getting there. I nodded. Then get there. She wiped beneath one eye. After Daniel died, it got worse. My chest tightened. You and Ethan became... She searched for the word. Closed. Closed, like you had your own little world. I almost objected. Then I remembered the notebook. The telescope. Our jokes about Daniel. The questions we researched together. From the outside, maybe it had looked private. But private was not secret. Rachel continued. You had traditions I wasn't part of. He came home talking about Grandpa, about your notebook, about things you two were going to do next week. Her voice became more emotional. And I felt like I was losing my own son inside my own house. Ethan stared at her. You weren't. I know that now. No. He shook his head. You had me every day. Rachel flinched. I know. He looked genuinely confused. Grandma had Wednesday. The simplicity of it broke something open in the room. Rachel covered her mouth briefly, then lowered her hand. Yes. Her voice was barely audible. But at the time it didn't feel that simple. I wanted to stay angry. Anger was easier, but I could hear the truth inside what she was saying. Not justification. Truth. She had been insecure. And instead of admitting that insecurity, she had treated my relationship with Ethan as a threat. Then Mark asked, what did the trust have to do with it? Rachel stiffened. There it was, the second layer. She looked at him. You already decided what that meant. No. I want you to tell me. Her eyes moved toward me. When Lucy created the education trust, I thought it was generous. It was for Ethan. I know. But... She swallowed. But then we talked about private school. I remembered that conversation clearly. Rachel sitting at my table, a brochure from St. Matthew Academy, tuition figures highlighted. She had argued that Ethan would benefit from smaller classes. I had not disagreed. I simply would not release trust money for it. Rachel continued. I asked if part of the fund could help with tuition. And I said no. You said the money was for his future. It was. Private school was his future. That was your interpretation. Her eyes flashed. And yours was the only one that mattered. For money, Daniel and I set aside yes. Margaret shifted in her chair. Paul stared at his hands. Rachel laughed without humor. You always say things so calmly. I don't understand what that means. It means you can make someone feel small without ever raising your voice. That hit me. I almost dismissed it, then stopped. Had I done that, maybe. I had spent decades working in schools making decisions, enforcing rules gently but firmly. Daniel used to say I could refuse a request so politely the person thanked me afterward. Maybe that quality felt very different when you were my daughter-in-law. Still, I said, if I made you feel small, you should have told me. You wouldn't have changed your mind. About the trust, no. She laughed again. See, that was not a parenting decision. It was a financial decision about money I controlled. Rachel's face hardened. And that's exactly what I heard. What that you controlled it. The word hung between us. She looked at Ethan. You were becoming the person he ran to emotionally, and then you were also the person who controlled this money supposedly meant for him. My pulse quickened. So you decided I was using money to influence him. I started wondering. That is not an answer. Yes. She finally said it. I wondered if you needed him to need you. The accusation hurt. But for the first time I understood the shape of Rachel's fear. In her mind every piece connected. My grief, my closeness with Ethan, the trust, the traditions. She had turned ordinary affection into evidence of control. Then she responded by taking control herself. I asked, is that when you stopped Wednesdays? She nodded. Not completely at first. Because you wanted distance. Yes. And when Ethan asked about me, I told him you were busy. Why? Because saying I didn't want him going would have made me the bad person. The honesty of that answer silenced everyone. Even Rachel seemed shocked she had said it. I felt Ethan's fingers tighten around mine. And when I asked about him, I said, Rachel's voice dropped. I told you he was busy, so each of us believed the other was pulling away. She nodded. Mark whispered Jesus. Rachel turned toward him. I didn't sit down and plan some campaign. You hid letters. I know. You read Mom's messages. Her eyes filled again. I know. You told people she wanted to be alone. I know. Rachel, that is a campaign. No. Her voice rose. It became one. The distinction mattered to her. I could see that. It started with one canceled Wednesday, she said. Then he asked why. I said you were busy. Then you called and I said he had homework. Then another thing happened, and another. She pressed both palms against the table. Every lie made the next one easier, because fixing it meant admitting the first one. No one spoke. That more than anything else she had said sounded true. The lies had built their own structure, and eventually Rachel had been living inside it too. She continued. Then Ethan would say something like, Grandma always listens, and I would get angry all over again. Or you would ask about a school event and I would think, here she comes again wanting to be involved in everything. I wanted to be invited. I know that now. You knew it then. She looked at me. No. Her voice broke. I knew you wanted access. I convinced myself that wasn't the same thing. That sentence hurt because it explained so much. She had turned love into intrusion, concern into pressure, presence into competition. I looked down at the binder, and the letters. Rachel wiped her cheeks. At first I forgot one. Ethan frowned. The camp one. She nodded. It was on my desk. Then I found it days later. Why didn't you mail it then? Rachel closed her eyes. Because by then I'd already told Lucy you hadn't asked about her. Mark stared at her. So you hid it? Yes. Ethan's face changed. Not anger. Something worse. Disappointment. Rachel saw it. I'm sorry. He looked away. She reached toward him. He pulled his hand back. Rachel froze. I wanted to hate her in that moment. A part of me did, but another part saw exactly what consequence looked like. Not revenge, not shouting. Her own son moving his hand away. She whispered Ethan. He still did not look at her. I kept making cards. I know, you said you mailed them. I know. You said Grandma didn't answer because she was busy. Rachel covered her mouth. Yes. His eyes filled. So I thought she didn't want to talk to me. No. Rachel's voice cracked. I never wanted you to think that. But I did. That was the sentence that finally broke her. Rachel bent forward and began crying. Not neatly, not carefully. Her shoulders shook. Margaret moved as if to comfort her, then stopped. I watched Rachel cry and felt no satisfaction, only exhaustion. After a moment, I asked the question that mattered more than anything else. Did you ever once ask Ethan what he wanted? Rachel slowly raised her head. Her face was wet. I repeated it. Not what you thought he needed. Not what you believed was healthy. Not what made you feel secure. Did you ever ask him if he wanted Wednesdays to stop? She said nothing. Did you ask whether he wanted me at his birthday silence? Did you ask whether he wanted me at his concerts? Her lips trembled. No, I nodded. There it was. The truth beneath every other truth. Rachel had spent 2 years claiming she knew what was best for Ethan, while never asking the simplest question. What do you want? Then Ethan turned toward Mark. My son had been silent for several minutes. Ethan looked at him with an expression I will never forget. Not accusing, searching. Dad. Mark swallowed. Yes, buddy. You knew. The words barely came out. Mark immediately shook his head. No, I swear to you, I didn't know your mom was stopping letters or telling Grandma those things. Ethan stared at him. Mark leaned forward. I should have known something was wrong, but I didn't know. Ethan looked down at the blue binder, then back at his father. But you never asked. Mark went completely still. No defense, no explanation, nothing. Because an 11-year-old boy had just said in 4 words what I had been trying to tell my son for weeks. He had not created Rachel's lies, but he had accepted the comfortable version of every story because asking questions might have created conflict. And while the adults around that table had spent years protecting themselves from uncomfortable conversations, Ethan had been carrying the consequences inside his backpack. Ethan's words stayed in the room long after he said them. But you never asked. Mark looked as though someone had struck him. For years, my son had believed that not choosing sides made him fair. If Rachel said Ethan was busy, he accepted it. If I said I was hurt, he told me everyone was under pressure. If a birthday invitation disappeared, he called it a misunderstanding. If a phone call went unanswered, he assumed someone forgot. He had spent almost 2 years treating conflict like a fire alarm he could silence by removing the batteries. Now his 11-year-old son had finally told him what that silence had cost. Mark lowered his eyes. You're right. Ethan did not respond. Mark tried again. I should have asked. Rachel wiped her face with both hands. This isn't all on Mark. No, I said. It isn't. Mark looked at me. I held his gaze. But part of it is. His shoulders dropped. I had imagined this conversation many times over the previous months. In some versions I screamed. In others I walked away. Sometimes during the loneliest nights, I pictured Mark finally understanding everything and immediately becoming the son I needed him to be. Reality was quieter and more painful. I looked at him and saw both things at once. My child, and a grown man who had failed me. Do you know what the worst part was? I asked. Mark's voice was low. What I believed all of you. His face tightened. I believed Rachel when she said Ethan was growing away from me. I believed you when you said everyone was busy. I believed there must be some reasonable explanation because I didn't want to think badly of either of you. I glanced at the blue binder, and every month that passed I wondered what I had done wrong. Mom. No. Let me finish. He nodded. I questioned everything. My voice shook now, but I kept going. I wondered if I had loved him too much after your father died. I wondered if I had made him responsible for my grief. I wondered if I called too often. I wondered if I was becoming one of those grandmothers who refuses to understand that children grow up. Mark's eyes filled. I made myself smaller so your household would stay comfortable. I could hear my own heartbeat. And while I was doing that, my grandson was being told I was too busy for him. Mark closed his eyes. I'm sorry. I know. I mean it. I know. I should have seen it. I took a breath. Yes. His eyes opened again. The words surprised him. Maybe he had expected me to rescue him from his guilt. I had done that his entire life. When he forgot something, I reminded him of how busy he was. When he made a poor decision, I looked for the fear underneath it. When he avoided hard conversations, I called him sensitive. Not this time. You should have seen it, I repeated. Mark nodded slowly. I did see pieces. That admission mattered. What pieces? He rubbed both hands over his face. Things that didn't add up, such as... He glanced at Rachel. She looked down. Sometimes Ethan would ask why you hadn't come to something, and Rachel would answer before I did. My stomach tightened. You noticed that? Yes. And I assumed she knew more because she handled the calendar. I said nothing. He continued. When you stopped coming around as much, I thought maybe you were still having a hard time after Dad. You never asked me. No. Why? The question was simple. The answer took him a long time. Because if you said Rachel was keeping you away, I would have had to deal with it. The room went still. Mark swallowed. And if Rachel said you were overstepping, I would have had to deal with that too. He laughed bitterly at himself. So I kept telling myself there wasn't actually a problem. I looked at him. That was easier. Yes. For you. He nodded. Yes. Ethan was watching his father carefully. Mark turned toward him. But it wasn't easier for you. Ethan shook his head. No. I'm sorry, buddy. Ethan looked down at the binder. I thought Grandma stopped liking me. My chest tightened so suddenly that I had to look away. Mark's face broke. She never did. I know now. No. Mark leaned forward. You should have known then. That was the first thing he said all night that sounded like accountability instead of regret. Ethan looked at him. Mark continued. It was my job to make sure you knew that. Rachel cried quietly beside him. No one tried to stop her. Margaret finally spoke. I need to say something. Everyone turned toward her. She looked at me. Lucy, I owe you an apology too. I was surprised. For what? For believing what I was told without ever checking. Rachel looked up. Mom. Margaret shook her head. No, Rachel. Her voice was gentle but firm. You told us Lucy preferred being alone. Rachel looked down again. You told us she was still struggling after Daniel died and didn't want family gatherings. Margaret's eyes filled. So when she wasn't at Christmas or birthdays or the fundraiser, I thought we were respecting her wishes. I stared at her. She continued. I never thought to call you directly. That wasn't your responsibility. Maybe not. She wiped her cheek. But kindness would have been. Paul nodded beside her. We should have noticed too. I did not want another circle of guilt. There was already enough in the room. So I said I don't blame either of you for loving Ethan. Margaret looked relieved and ashamed at the same time. I know, this was never about who gets to be the real grandparents. Rachel flinched at that phrase. I continued. There was room for all of us. Ethan spoke quietly. There still is. Every adult looked at him. He seemed almost embarrassed by the attention. What Mark asked. Ethan shrugged. I like Grandma Lucy. I like Grandma Margaret and Grandpa Paul. Paul's eyes softened. I don't get why everyone acts like I have to pick. No one had an answer. Because there wasn't one. He never should have been asked to pick. Not openly, not secretly, not emotionally. Rachel looked at him. I never wanted you to feel that way. But I did. She nodded. I know. For the first time she did not add a defense. Mark stood. He walked around the table and crouched beside Ethan. I need to fix some things. Ethan looked skeptical. How? It was a good question. Apologies were easy. Systems were harder. Mark looked at me, then at Rachel. First, Mom goes back on the school contact list. Rachel stiffened slightly. Mark noticed. This isn't punishment. She said nothing. She's Ethan's grandmother. If the school allows authorized family contacts, there's no reason she should have been removed. I said only if Ethan is comfortable with that. Mark looked at him. Are you? Ethan nodded immediately. Yes, Mark continued. Second school information doesn't go through one person anymore. Rachel looked at him. What does that mean? It means important school events go to both of us. If Mom is invited, she gets told directly. Mark Numan, his voice was calm, not loud. That made me pay attention. I'm not saying you're incapable of handling the calendar. I'm saying I shouldn't have handed you the responsibility for every relationship in this family. Rachel stared at him. He continued. Third, neither of us speaks for Ethan about whether he wants contact with Mom. I looked at Ethan. That includes me. He frowned. What I won't assume you want Wednesdays just because I want them. I do want them. A small laugh moved around the table. Even Rachel almost smiled. Mark nodded. Then we ask. We don't decide for him, and then tell everyone what he supposedly feels. Rachel took a shaky breath. All right. And the move is off. Her head snapped up. What for now? We haven't even decided to move. You've been looking at houses. That doesn't mean Rachel. His voice remained controlled. We are not moving Ethan 2 hours away while this family is trying to repair something that happened because communication was manipulated. The word stung her. Manipulated. Mark looked exhausted. What else should I call it? She looked away. I said nothing. That decision belonged to their marriage. I would not use this moment to control them the way Rachel had tried to control me. But I was relieved. Ethan was too. I could see it in his shoulders. Then Mark looked at me. I'll make things right. I shook my head. You can make things better. His expression changed. There's a difference. I reached toward the binder and closed it gently. I lost almost 2 years, Mark. I know. No, you know the number. I looked at Ethan. You don't know the ordinary things inside it. Haircuts, school projects, new jokes, bad grades, good grades, books I never heard about, concerts I never saw. No apology could return those. I looked back at Mark. I want a relationship with my grandson. You have one. I know that now. I placed my hand over the blue binder. But I am not going back to pretending nothing happened just because the truth finally came out. Rachel's eyes filled again. I turned toward her. I believe people can change. She looked surprised. So you forgive me, no? The answer came easily. Everyone went silent. I continued. Not yet. Rachel swallowed. I thought, forgiveness isn't a switch. I kept my voice gentle. And it certainly isn't something you get because you admitted the truth after the evidence was sitting on the table. She looked down. That's fair. I hope I can forgive you. I meant it. But trust is different. She nodded slowly. How do I rebuild it behavior? She looked at me. Not promises, not explanations, not one emotional dinner. I glanced around the table. Behavior over time. Mark nodded. Rachel whispered, okay. I looked at Ethan last. He seemed tired. Too tired for an 11-year-old who had only wanted the adults in his family to tell the truth. Can I take the binder home? I asked him. He shook his head immediately. My heart dipped. Then he hugged it against his chest. Not yet. I smiled. Fair enough. I still need it. For what? His expression softened. I don't know. That answer told me something important. The binder had become more than proof. It had become security. Something solid Ethan could hold while adults kept changing the story around him. So I did not ask again. When dinner finally ended, Mark walked me to the door. Before I stepped outside, he said, Mom, yes, I really am sorry. I looked at him. I believe you. His eyes filled with relief. Then I added, now show me. He nodded. That was the beginning. Not forgiveness, not restoration. The beginning. Because apologies can open a door. But only consistent choices tell you whether it is safe to walk through it again. The first Wednesday back arrived 3 weeks after the dinner with the blue binder. 3 weeks may not sound like a long time. After nearly 2 years, it felt enormous. There had been phone calls in between. A school email with my name finally included. A text from Mark confirming the science fair schedule. One awkward message from Rachel that simply said, Ethan would like to restart Wednesdays, if you're still comfortable with that. I stared at that sentence for several minutes before answering. Of course I am. Then I deleted it. It sounded too eager. I wrote yes. I'd be glad to have him. Then I deleted that too. Finally, I sent Wednesday works for me. Please ask Ethan what time he'd like to come. That mattered to me. I wanted the first restored Wednesday to begin with his choice. Not mine, not Rachel's, not Mark's, his. At 3:24 that afternoon, I heard a car door close outside. My heart started pounding like I was waiting for someone I had never met. I looked around my kitchen. Everything was almost exactly as it had been before. The same wooden table, the same refrigerator covered with magnets from places Daniel and I had visited, the same drawer where the old notebook still rested. But I had changed one thing. There were no special decorations, no balloons, no giant welcome back sign, no mountain of presents. I had thought about all of those things. Then I decided against them. Ethan did not need a celebration that made the day feel like a reunion after a war. He needed Wednesday. Just Wednesday. When the doorbell rang, I opened it too quickly. Ethan stood on the porch in a gray hoodie with his backpack over one shoulder. Mark was behind him. Hi, Grandma. Hi. For 1 second, we just looked at each other. Then he stepped forward and hugged me. I closed my eyes. There are moments when happiness hurts because grief is standing right beside it. This was one of those moments. I hugged him tightly, but not for too long. When I let go, I looked at Mark. I'll bring him home around 7, I said. Actually, Mark glanced at Ethan. He asked if you could bring him. Ethan shrugged. If that's okay. Of course. Mark smiled. Have fun. He hesitated as if he wanted to say something else. Then he seemed to understand that this afternoon was not about him. He left. Ethan stepped inside. For the first few minutes we were strangely formal. That surprised me. I had imagined everything returning instantly. Instead, he stood near the kitchen table and looked around as if he were checking whether the house still belonged to the memory he had carried. You moved the plant. I followed his gaze. The fern. Yeah. It wasn't getting enough light. Oh. Another silence. Then he pointed toward the refrigerator. You still have that magnet. It was a cheap plastic astronaut we had bought at the Science Museum years earlier. Why wouldn't I? I don't know. He dropped his backpack beside his old chair. I heard myself say, Are you hungry? His face changed. A little, kind of. Grilled cheese. Now the smile came. Yes. Tomato soup. Only if you don't make it weird. I gasped. My tomato soup has never been weird. You put basil in it. That is called flavor. It tastes like leaves. You eat lettuce, not in soup, and just like that a piece of the old rhythm returned. I took out the bread. Ethan opened the refrigerator without asking and found the cheese. I pretended not to notice how emotional that made me. He remembered where things were. He remembered which cabinet held the skillet. He remembered that I kept butter in the door instead of the drawer. Small things, ordinary things. Evidence of a life Rachel had tried to convince both of us no longer existed. We made sandwiches side by side. I cut his diagonally. He looked at the plate. Triangles. Obviously. Grandpa really said they taste better. He believed geometry affected flavor. That makes no sense. Your grandfather was not always committed to scientific rigor. Ethan laughed. For a second, Daniel was in the room with us. Not painfully, warmly. We ate at the kitchen table. I wanted to ask 100 questions. What had Rachel said since Sunday? Was he angry with her? Did he still trust Mark? Had anyone talked to him about moving? Did he understand the trust? Was he frightened that contact with me might disappear again? I asked none of them. Instead, I said, How's percussion better? Still rushing. Yes, good. Consistency matters. He rolled his eyes. I smiled. Then he became quiet. After a while, he said, Mom's going to counseling. I heard. Dad, too. That's good. They argue less. I nodded. I did not ask for details. Children should not become reporters on their parents' marriage. Ethan studied his sandwich. Are you mad at Mom? The question was inevitable. I put my cup down. I'm hurt. That's not the same. No. Are you mad sometimes? He nodded as though that answer made sense. Do you hate her? No. That answer came easily. He looked up. Really, really? Why not? I thought before speaking. Because what she did was wrong. Very wrong. But I don't think one wrong thing or even many wrong things automatically tells you everything a person is. He considered that. She lied a lot. Yes. To both of us. Yes. She said she was sorry. I believe she is sorry. Then why isn't everything normal? There it was, the question adults so often answer badly. Because we want children to believe apologies magically repair damage. I leaned forward. Do you remember when you cracked Grandpa's telescope lens cover? His eyes widened. You said you'd never tell. I didn't say I'd never use it as an educational example. He almost smiled. You dropped it. I know, and you apologized. I did. But the crack was still there. He looked at me. So saying sorry didn't erase it. No. But you still loved the telescope. Yeah. And we still used it. He nodded slowly. Trust is a little like that. I continued. An apology matters. But after something breaks, people need time and careful behavior to make it feel safe again. Is Mom unsafe? No. I answered quickly. I mean emotionally safe. Safe to believe. Safe to trust with certain things. He seemed to understand. I don't want you and Mom fighting because of me. I reached across the table. This is not because of you. He looked doubtful. It kind of is. No, everything was about me. That doesn't mean you caused it. I squeezed his hand. The adults made choices. The adults are responsible for fixing those choices. He stared at our hands. Then he said, I thought maybe I shouldn't have shown the binder. My heart tightened. Why Mom cried. I took a slow breath. Do you regret showing it? He thought. No. Then don't carry responsibility for how adults reacted to the truth. He looked at me. You're not mad that I kept stuff mad. I nearly laughed. I'm amazed. He seemed embarrassed. It's kind of weird. No, Connor said it was weird. Connor is 11, so am I. Exactly. Neither of you is qualified to determine what is weird. That got another smile. After we ate, Ethan went to his backpack. He unzipped it and pulled out the blue binder. My chest tightened immediately. He set it on the table. I brought it. I see that. You want to look? I did. Very much. But I hesitated. Only if you want to. He opened it. This time there were no adults arguing around us. No accusations. No Rachel explaining. No Mark discovering failures page by page. Just Ethan and me. We went through it slowly. He explained drawings I hadn't understood, told me which school papers mattered, showed me a page filled with astronomy facts. We laughed over a terrible drawing of Daniel that made him look like a bald pirate. He had more hair than that. Not much. He would be offended. He'd survive. No, he wouldn't. That's unfortunately part of the problem. Ethan went quiet. Then he smiled sadly. Grandpa would have liked this notebook. The binder. Yeah, he would have. We turned another page, then another. Finally, Ethan stopped. This one's dumb. He tried to flip past it. I put my finger gently on the page. Then I definitely want to see it. He groaned. Grandma. What? He hesitated, then let go. At the top in his handwriting were the words, "Things I want Grandma to know when I see her again." There were several bullet points. I got an A in science. I hate mushrooms now. Dad says I'm getting tall. I can find Jupiter by myself. I still have Grandpa's telescope. I never forgot Wednesday. I stopped. My vision blurred instantly. I tried to blink the tears away. I failed. Ethan looked uncomfortable. I told you it was dumb. No. My voice broke. It's not dumb. He watched me carefully. I touched the last line with one finger. I never forgot Wednesday. For almost 2 years I had wondered whether he had. I had lain awake at night imagining him growing up without me. I had blamed myself for losing something that had actually been hidden from both of us. The tears came harder. Ethan slid out of his chair and came around the table. He hugged me. This time I did not hide my crying. I'm sorry, he whispered. I pulled back immediately. No. Never apologize for this. I made you cry. You made me remember something important. What that love doesn't disappear just because someone interrupts it. He looked down. Are we gonna be okay? I knew what he meant. Not just him and me. All of us. Rachel, Mark, the family. I could have promised. Adults often do that when they desperately want children to feel safe. Instead, I chose the truth. I think we can be. He looked at me. But it'll take work. Yes. From Mom, from everyone. Even you, especially me. He seemed surprised. What did you do? I stayed quiet too long. I closed the binder. I thought keeping the peace meant avoiding conflict. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it means allowing a bad situation to keep growing. He nodded slowly. Then he looked toward the hallway. Can we use the telescope? Absolutely. The sky was clear enough by 6:30. We carried Daniel's old telescope into the backyard. Ethan adjusted the legs while I brought out 2 jackets. He had gotten faster at setting it up. More confident. He aimed toward the southeast. There. What Jupiter? I looked through the lens. A bright point floated against the darkness. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Ethan said, Grandma, yes. Can we start another notebook? I turned toward him. He had the blue binder tucked under one arm. What about that one? I want to keep it. You should. But I don't want everything to be about stuff we missed. Something inside me softened. What would the new notebook be for? He thought for a second, then smiled. Stuff we haven't done yet. I looked at him standing beneath the darkening Ohio sky, Daniel's telescope between us. That sounds like a very good notebook. The blue binder had preserved what someone tried to interrupt. But Ethan was right. We could not spend the rest of our relationship proving the past existed. Eventually, healing had to mean making something new. And that first Wednesday back under a sky, Daniel would have loved my grandson, and I finally stopped collecting evidence of what we had lost. We started thinking about what we still had time to find. By the time summer arrived, no one in our family was pretending everything had returned to normal. I was grateful for that. Normal had been the word we used while things were quietly breaking. Normal was Rachel answering Ethan's phone. Normal was Mark not asking questions. Normal was me accepting one canceled visit after another because I was afraid that objecting would make me difficult. I no longer wanted normal. I wanted honest. Honest was slower, more awkward, sometimes uncomfortable, but at least it was real. Rachel and I were not suddenly close. We did not begin having lunch together or exchanging cheerful messages every morning. For the first few months, most of our conversations were practical. Ethan will be ready at 3:30. The Science Museum closes at 5. He left his sweatshirt at your house. Can you bring him home by 7? Simple things, clear things. There was something almost healing about communication that meant exactly what it said. Mark changed too. Not dramatically. That would have been easy to distrust. Instead, he began doing small things consistently. He called me himself. He sent school dates without being reminded. If Ethan had a concert, I received the information at the same time as everyone else. When plans changed, Mark told me instead of assuming Rachel would handle it. Most importantly, he started asking questions. Not suspicious questions, responsible ones. Does Ethan want to go? Did Mom get told who has actually spoken to her? What did Ethan himself say? I watched my son slowly learn that involvement was not the same as interference, and that silence was not the same as peace. Rachel began counseling. I knew very little about what she discussed there, and I wanted it that way. That work belonged to her. A few times she tried to explain what she was learning. I think I've spent a lot of my life believing that if someone is important to somebody I love, then there's less room for me. I listened. I did not fix it for her. Another time she said I think I confused being needed with being loved. That one stayed with me. Because if I was being fair, I understood it. Not the lies, not the manipulation, but the fear underneath them. The belief that love is a chair in a crowded room, and if someone else sits down, you will be left standing. I had seen people live their entire lives that way. Rachel had almost damaged her relationship with her own son because of it. One Sunday afternoon in June, she came to my house alone. I was surprised to see her. She stood on the porch holding nothing, no flowers, no apology gift, no peace offering wrapped in tissue paper. I was glad. I opened the door. Rachel, can I come in? Yes. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Ethan and I had spent hundreds of Wednesdays. Rachel looked around. Her eyes rested briefly on the old black notebook on the shelf. Then she looked at me. I want to apologize again. I said nothing. She continued. Not because I think saying it again changes anything. I appreciated that beginning. I've been thinking about what I did. Her fingers tightened together. I told myself I was protecting Ethan because that sounded better than admitting I was protecting myself. I let the words settle. She looked down. I was jealous. That was the first time she had used the word. Not threatened, not uncomfortable, jealous. She swallowed. I hated how happy he was here. My chest tightened. I hated that he came home excited about Wednesdays. I hated when he said you understood him. I hated that Daniel's telescope meant so much to him because it was something I couldn't give him. She shook her head. That sounds terrible. It sounds honest. She looked at me. I should have talked to you. Yes, I should have talked to Ethan. Yes, I should never have lied. No. Her eyes filled. And I should never have made him think you didn't want him. That was the hardest part to hear. I looked toward the window. My tomato plants had begun climbing their cages outside. For several seconds I watched the leaves move in the breeze. Then I said, that is the part I will probably have the most trouble forgiving. Rachel nodded. I know. She did not ask me to hurry. That mattered. Finally I said I accept your apology. Her shoulders lowered slightly. Then I continued. But accepting it does not mean we go back. I understand. And it does not mean I stop having boundaries because we're trying to repair the family. I understand that too. I looked directly at her. The education trust stays exactly as it is. She nodded immediately. I know. It belongs to Ethan's future. Not to you. Not to Mark. Not to me, really. I'm just responsible for protecting it. I won't ask about it again. Good. That conversation could have become another fight. It didn't. Rachel stood to leave 20 minutes later. At the door, she hesitated. I know you may never trust me the same way. I probably won't. Her face fell slightly. I added, different doesn't always mean impossible. She looked at me. That's more than I deserve. I'm not interested in deciding what people deserve. I opened the door. I'm interested in what they do next. She nodded. That became the rule I tried to live by. What happens next? Not what people promise. Not how ashamed they appear. What do they do next? Rachel stopped filtering communication. Mark stopped hiding behind her organization. I stopped swallowing questions just because someone might dislike hearing them. And Ethan got to be 11. That may have been the greatest repair of all. He spent Wednesdays with me because he wanted to. Some weeks we cooked. Some weeks he spent half the afternoon complaining about school and the other half staring at his phone. Once he came over, ate 2 grilled cheese sandwiches, and then told me he was bored. I nearly celebrated. Boredom was normal, real normal. Not every visit needed to prove we had a special bond. Not every conversation needed to repair the past. Sometimes love was simply sitting in the same room while Ethan did homework and I read. He continued seeing Margaret and Paul too. I encouraged it. Paul took him fishing twice that summer. Margaret helped him choose a new backpack for middle school. The first time Ethan mentioned spending a weekend with them, he watched my face carefully. I knew why. Have fun, I said. That's it. What else would there be? He shrugged. I don't know. I did. He was still checking whether affection for one grandparent might hurt another. I refused to let that fear survive. You are allowed to love all of us, I told him. Even Mom. The question surprised me. Especially your mom. He looked uncertain. She did bad stuff. She did. And you're still mad, sometimes. Then why should I? Because my relationship with your mother is mine. I leaned closer. Yours belongs to you. He thought about that, then nodded. That was how I knew we were healing. Not because everyone agreed. Because Ethan was slowly being released from managing adult feelings. In August, a few days before school started, he came over carrying a new black composition notebook. He placed it on my kitchen table. Across the front in silver marker he had written, "Things we still want to know." I smiled. You remembered. Obviously. Obviously. That's what you say when I ask dumb questions. I have never called one of your questions dumb. You called the dinosaur bathroom one unnecessary. It was unnecessary. It was scientifically important. We will have to agree to disagree. He opened the notebook. The first page contained a new list. Can animals see the same stars we do? Why do people remember arguments differently? Could Grandpa actually see Jupiter? Why does toast taste better than bread? I pointed to the last one. Now that is scientific. Ethan grinned. That evening we carried Daniel's telescope into the backyard. The sky was clear. Late summer insects hummed near the fence. Ethan adjusted the telescope while I brought 2 folding chairs outside. The blue binder was no longer in his backpack. A few weeks earlier he had asked if he could leave it at my house. Are you sure I had asked? Yeah. Why? He shrugged. I don't think I need to carry it anymore. I understood. We stored it on the bookshelf beside our old notebook, not thrown away, not forgotten, just no longer needed as armor. Now, sitting beneath the night sky, Ethan pointed toward a bright object above the trees. There, Jupiter. Yes. How do you know? Because I'm smarter than you. Good night, Ethan. He laughed. I looked through the telescope. There it was. Small, bright, steady. I thought about the first night Daniel showed Ethan that telescope. About all the Wednesdays that followed. About the ones we lost. For a long time I believed the blue binder had proven something simple. That Ethan remembered me. That he loved me. That Rachel had been wrong when she said he barely knew me. But sitting beside my grandson that night, I finally understood that the binder had proved something far more important. A child should never have to collect evidence that he loves someone because the adults around him refuse to tell the truth. Ethan should never have needed those envelopes, those lists, those saved school papers. He should never have wondered whether I had stopped caring. And I should never have spent 2 years believing he had forgotten me, simply because I was too afraid of conflict to demand honest answers. The real victory was not that Rachel had been exposed. It was not that Mark finally admitted his failure. It was not even that I had my Wednesdays back. The victory was that Ethan no longer had to carry the truth alone. Rachel was learning that love was not a competition. Mark was learning that silence could become permission. I was learning that boundaries did not make me cruel. And Ethan was learning something I wished every child could know, without having to earn it the hard way. Adults are responsible for their own emotions. Children are allowed to love freely. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Grandma, yes. Do you still think about Grandpa every day I look toward the sky? Yes. Does it still hurt sometimes? Then how are you happy? I smiled. That belonged in our notebook, because 2 things can be true at once. He frowned thoughtfully. You can miss something and still love what you have. Exactly. He nodded. Then he opened the notebook and wrote it down. I watched his pencil move across the page. For nearly 2 years I had believed my grandson was forgetting me. The truth was, he had been carrying me with him every single day, in drawings, letters, questions, memories, and a blue binder hidden inside his backpack. Now he did not have to carry me that way anymore. He only had to come on Wednesday, and I would be here. What happened to me taught me something I wish I had understood much earlier. Keeping the peace is not always the same as protecting a family. For a long time I believed that staying quiet made me kind. I thought swallowing my hurt would prevent conflict. I told myself that if I remained patient enough, reasonable enough, and undemanding enough, the people I loved would eventually do the right thing. But silence has a cost. Sometimes when we refuse to ask difficult questions, we leave room for someone else to control the story. I also learned that love should never be treated like a competition. A child does not have to love one grandparent less in order to love another more. A son should not have to choose between his wife and his mother when the real choice should simply be honesty. And no child should ever be forced to carry messages, secrets, or emotional burdens that belong to adults. Ethan's blue binder reminded me of something even more important. Real love leaves traces. It lives in ordinary memories, familiar jokes, handwritten notes, favorite meals, shared traditions, and the feeling of knowing someone will listen when you speak. Those things cannot easily be erased, even when distance manipulation or misunderstanding tries to separate people. But forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. You can forgive someone and still have boundaries. You can love your family and still say, this behavior is not acceptable. You can want reconciliation without surrendering your dignity. And sometimes the healthiest way to save a relationship is to stop pretending everything is fine. If there is one thing I hope you take from my story, it is this. Never let fear of conflict convince you that your feelings do not matter. Ask the question, tell the truth, protect your boundaries, and when you love someone, make sure they hear it directly from you. Life is too short to let someone else speak for your heart. If you were in my place, could you have forgiven Rachel? And do you think Mark was also responsible because he chose not to ask questions? I would truly love to hear your thoughts and your own experiences in the comments. And if this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel and join us